is to examine the progress made regarding the reorganization of the Department of State and the role that the Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources is in ensuring effective management of resources and operations within the department, and the role of this position relative to the Undersecretary for Foreign Assistance and the Undersecretary for Management. And I'm now going to recognize myself for an opening statement. I think it's been very clear that Secretary Rubio is leading sweeping overhaul to give us a State Department that is efficient and accountable, which is something that it has not been. A State Department where every single dollar that goes through that agency, it puts this country, it puts our country, it puts the United States of America first above all else. Foreign aid is not benevolence. It's not charity. It's a soft power that gives America a chance to get what it is that we need because of some mutual benefit that exists out there between two nations. It's not an opportunity to push radical liberal ideas on countries that would otherwise want to be our allies. As chairman of this committee, I've called out this madness for a number of years. Foreign aid programs with zero benefit to America or even to the countries that they're supposedly helping. America, in many cases, would have been better off burning that money than spending it in the ways that it had previously. In the year 2000, the State Department's budget was $9.5 billion. Under Joe Biden, it was over $55 billion. And I don't think that we could say our foreign policy was $45 billion more effective in those years. This past Friday, 1,300 State Department personnel were laid off. But guess what? Between 2007 and 2024, 23,000 new State Department employees had been added. More than the number of agents that Border Patrol is mandated to have by Congress. That to me is an astounding number. America did not get the return that it needed on that investment. I could give you a number of examples that we looked at in the Oversight Subcommittee and on this committee over the years, but I'm going to give you just one right now. The disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan left 13 U.S. service members dead at Abbey Gate. It left people literally hanging off the wings of military aircraft, left an overrun embassy and billions of dollars left behind, along with millions of dollars of condoms left to the Taliban. Those were real things. Many colleagues in here, they tried to defend that record. The same people who said Afghanistan was a glowing success, that withdrawal was, everything was perfect and flawless and nothing could have been done better. The same people that said that are now begging us not to fix the broken machine that let that happen. That's not diplomacy, that's delusion. They'll call President Trump's effort to eliminate 1,300 duplicative State Department roles self-sabotage and a gift to our adversaries. What they call self-sabotage, we call accountability for the real sabotage of those who led the Afghanistan withdrawal and the funding of transgender job fairs and LGBTQ musicals and DEI operas and drag show tutorials. Our State Department should not be more concerned with promoting DEI and giving handouts to foreign NGOs than defending the interests of the American people. That is changing. Under Secretary Rubio, that is changing. This isn't disarmament. It's a strategic realignment. America needs a focused and a mission-driven State Department where every dollar and every diplomat puts the United States of America first. A State Department that can answer, not only answer, but actually takes the time to ask the questions, what does America actually need from a country or a region? What do we need from them? What does that country or region actually want from the United States of America? And does what we provide get us what we need? Or does it not? Because if the State Department can't answer those questions, then it is not meeting the moment. We need a State Department that isn't afraid of removing career bureaucrats who think they're above oversight. Many of these so-called experts oversaw 2 decades of failure, from botched regime change to a rising China and wasteful foreign aid. That's not expertise, that is inertia. Congress should not be using taxpayer money to fund permanent jobs programs for globalist insiders, in my opinion. We should be funding a State Department that serves Americans. That means being able to explain why $1 should go from a person's pocket to somebody who is in another country, somebody who is not even an American. Why should that take place? They better be able to explain that. If that rattles the career bureaucrats at Foggy Bottom, then good. They need to remember who it is exactly that they work for. Secretary Rubio is not hollowing out the State Department. He is rebuilding it to win. This is about fixing a broken system. Real reform makes the State Department stronger, not weaker. Today's witness, Deputy Secretary Michael Rigas, is helping lead that charge. With a background in disciplined resource management and no-nonsense approach to results, he's the right man to guide the next generation of State Department leadership. Mr. Rigas, thank you for being here. The American people are counting on you to make sure that our diplomats serve one interest and one interest only: the United States of America. In that, I'm now going to recognize Ranking Member Meeks from New York for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Deputy Secretary Rigas, I appreciate you're here to explain the Secretary's reorganization plans. You know, this is a dark time for American diplomacy. President Trump continues to isolate the United States, alienate our allies, and create space for adversaries like Russia and China to fill the void. We face serious global challenges, from Russia's war in Ukraine and instability in the Middle East to great power competition with China. America's diplomats and development experts are our first line of defense. If we are serious about leading globally, we need a capable, strategic, and fully staffed diplomatic corps. Instead, Mr. Secretary, you and Secretary Rubio are gutting the very institutions we rely on to confront these threats. Just days ago, you fired more than 1,300 State Department employees. Secretary Rubio claims it was to put America first. But the people you dismissed, career public servants, many with decades of experience, working hard just as our folks in the military, believing in America, one soft power, one hard defense, but all patriots of the United States, who have all put America first each and every day. They've served in war zones like Afghanistan and Iraq, responded to genocide in Burma, and helping bring Americans home during the COVID crises. Let's be clear. You've created the largest brain drain in the State Department's modern history, occurring as China and others expand their global footprint while we shrink ours. And you're doing it without a plan, proper consultation, or transparency. When this committee asked for a rationale behind the state's 15% staffing cut, no one could answer. Like so many of our oversight questions to your department, we're still waiting. Your budget officials fell back on talking points about how the State Department's budget has doubled since 2000, ignoring inflation, the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the department's expanded mission, including implementing programs like PEPFAR, which has saved over 25 million lives and helped slow the spread of HIV and AIDS worldwide, even here at home. Meanwhile, the Defense Department's budget has almost tripled in that same 25-year time frame. Both our soldiers are heroes, and our members of the State Department are heroes, working for America every day. Yes, state's budget has grown to meet new challenges, but staffing hasn't kept pace. And if the Secretary really wants to shorten the clearance process, the Secretary can do that with a memo, not blind firings. Beyond the numbers, your disregard for congressional oversight is unacceptable. Since January, we've sent dozens of letters asking about plans to reorganize the State Department and unlawfully collapse USAID into state, roll back mandated programs, diversity efforts, and close offices supporting our Afghan allies. Guess what we have received? Almost nothing. The law requires consultation for a reason. And if the Secretary can't even stay to answer questions at the one hearing this committee held with a state official, it's no surprise his staff follows suit. If you don't have answers to basic oversight questions, it would be wise to slow down and consider the consequences. The Secretary claimed this reorganization was a product of consultation with the workforce. That's false. Your colleague, Andrew Vperk, admitted it was designed by fewer than 10 people. The Secretary also claims his firings wouldn't affect overseas posts. Also false. We've heard from diplomats who have already sent their families and belongings abroad only to receive termination notices. Others assigned to serve as critical posts like Baghdad were fired weeks before starting language training or deploying. You even fired officers traveling with the Secretary, people preparing his talking points for the very East Asia meetings he was tweeting about. That's not reform. That's chaos. You fired veterans serving at state without cause, without process, without dignity. One of those veterans said it best, and I quote, "These processes were not well thought out or executed. The personal aspect of this process, was as botched as it could have been, and it was completely avoidable," unquote. And you aren't just firing experts, you're gutting the programs they ran, programs that advanced America's interests and protected American lives. What exactly is America First really all about? And let's not forget the $2.9 billion of so-called America First Opportunities Fund, a slush fund Secretary Rubio has proposed to spend on President Trump's whims with zero congressional oversight. House Republicans love to demand transparency. Will they demand it now or rush to rubber stamp his latest power grab? So, Secretary Riggs, are you putting American diplomacy on a dangerous path? Step back from the brink, restore the dignity of American diplomats, and work with Congress on a smarter, strategic way forward, one that strengthens, not sabotages, our global leadership. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Meeks. I now recognize you, Deputy Secretary, for your opening statement.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Mast, Ranking Member Meeks, and esteemed members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me here today to speak about the President's fiscal year 2026 budget request for the Department of State, totaling $28.5 billion. This figure is a decrease of $25.9 billion, or 48%, below the FY25 appropriations. As the Deputy Secretary for Management and Resources, it is my responsibility to ensure we are good stewards of the taxpayer dollars you provide the department and that they are spent in accordance with the goals of the President and the Secretary. Our budget reflects Secretary Rubio's department-wide reorganization and the important work we are doing to make the State Department a more efficient and effective organization, better able to advance the core interests of the American people and accountable to the American taxpayers. As Secretary Rubio has stated, we must reform and streamline the State Department so that it becomes an effective instrument of American foreign policy. When the Secretary announced the department's reorganization plan on April 22nd, the department had over 1,500 office units in the United States alone. This is for an organization that implements foreign policy. Any foreign policy decision, statement, or action at the State Department must pass through more than a dozen or more separate offices for review and clearance before it even reaches a senior State Department official to approve a course of action. This time-consuming and bureaucratic process is no way to run a department in the modern age, where we must move at the speed of relevance. The reorganization will merge, eliminate, consolidate, or streamline nearly 45% of the department's domestic offices. Moving forward, every bureau and office will have a clear mission and purpose. We want to empower our ambassadors and diplomats in the field and our regional bureaus in Washington to push forward the President's America First foreign policy agenda and deliver results for the American people. For too long, single-issue offices have mushroomed in number and influence, often distorting our foreign policy objectives to serve their specific interests, slowing down the department's ability to function. This reorganization includes a new approach to foreign assistance. As of July 1st, USAID no longer implements foreign assistance. Secretary Rubio has ushered in a new era where the State Department takes the lead and utilizes foreign assistance as a core tool of strategic investment and engagement for the United States. The State Department will now directly administer foreign assistance and other functions and programs that align with the administration's policy priorities, as those are being transitioned to the State Department as well. This integration will better align our foreign aid with our foreign policy objectives and will ensure that every taxpayer dollar spent is justified by its benefit to American national interests. Too often, we have funneled billions of dollars in assistance projects that host governments did not even want and that led to no tangible benefit to the American people. Too often, we've tried to impose divisive ideologies on other countries, which have pushed away potential allies and partners into the hands of China, Russia, and others. Too often, we have failed to leverage our generosity and good relations to bring home real achievements for the American people, the same American people who have bankrolled these programs for decades, which have not provided tangible benefits to their own communities. As the Secretary noted, the countries that benefit most from our generosity often fail to reciprocate that support. For example, sub-Saharan African nations voted with the United States only 29% of the time on essential UN resolutions in 2023, despite receiving billions in assistance paid for by the American people. Going forward, the United States will remain the largest foreign aid donor in the world by a wide margin. China and Russia do not deliver the kind of life-saving assistance that the American people have provided for decades, and there is no sign this will change. But our focus will be on trade, not aid, and we will always advance the interests of the United States. We will put the United States and the American people first in all aspects of our foreign policy, and we will continue to build and cultivate positive, constructive relationships with the governments and people of the world. Congress and American taxpayers expect us to deliver results for the American people, and I look forward to working with Secretary Rubio and this committee to deliver those results. As I've said before, I know that every dollar we spend and every program we fund comes from the labor of a tax-paying American family. Our goal is to have a State Department that is accountable to the American people and effective in unleashing the potential of the world's most talented diplomatic workforce. Thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you for your opening statement, Secretary. I'm going to begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes of questioning, and then we'll alternate between each side as we go down the line. I want to start with this. It's my understanding that there was a goal of 15% reduction in force, and that we're either close to meeting that or have met that goal already. And so just beginning with that, what are the workforce modernization priorities that you want to focus on now at this point if we're getting close to that metric?
Sure. Thank you for that question, Chairman Mast. The priorities of the reorganization were to consolidate offices that had similar, duplicative, or overlapping functions, eliminate offices and bureaus whose functions were no longer relevant or were not aligned with the administration's policy priorities, and to focus the work of the department on making sure that everything we did was for the benefit of making America stronger, safer, and more prosperous. And the 15% number that you referenced came from our initial assessment after consulting with the undersecretaries at the department, which at the time were all, I think, with the exception of one, they're all still career officers of the department who are serving as senior bureau officials, where we asked them, what do you need to operate? What does a successful department organization look like to you? And they came back and provided us what they proposed for org charts for the department that they thought ought to be functioning going forward.
Very good. I appreciate that. And, I think it's important that you work on focus. You mentioned in your comments just right now, sub-Saharan Africa, and I think I could put a fine point on something you were saying. You were saying, a lot of these sub-Saharan African countries were not supporting the United States of America despite the support they were getting from us. A fine point I would put on that, these were some of the biggest recipients of PEPFAR, and they were giving the United States of America the least amount of support. I think that's a fine point to put on. And if our diplomats aren't paying attention to that, then again, they're not meeting the moment. They're just being delusional about what is supposed to be a soft power and is not really being effective as a soft power. I want to switch gears to something else, and I want to talk about both your role and the other deputy role. We have 2 deputy secretaries at the Department of State. It's a unique structure. And it brings me to a question about chain of command, and I've kind of thought about it in my mind when one of my kids asks me something and they don't like the answer, and then they go to my wife and ask her the same thing, hoping for a different answer. And I worry sometimes that can take place within the department. So in us looking for effective ways to consolidate financial management, I'm of the mind that we should consider a chief financial officer for the State Department. And I'd like to know your opinions about that, giving them full statutory authority and everything that they would need in that role. 1 deputy, 1 chief financial officer. I'd love to know your opinions about that as a structure.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. The State Department is one of these CFO Act agencies, so it does have a statutory, presidentially appointed, Senate-confirmed chief financial officer position. That position hasn't been filled in a number of years. The duties have been performed by an acting CFO who's generally been the deputy and the head of the CGFS Bureau. I think it would be prudent to consider nominating someone for that role. I think having the DMR role serves as provides sort of a strategic oversight for the department in terms of how we ought to be engaging our resources and how we ought to be managing the department. And the CFO and the other bureaus are more of a sort of an action officer to execute and carry out those functions. So I do think there is a role for the DMR CFO relationship, where one is setting the strategy, the other one is executing on it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that opinion. I think I have time for one more question, and you having time to answer that. And I want to switch gears one more time to, again, a totally different subject than what we were just covering in the previous 2. President Trump implemented on April 9th an executive order reforming defense weapons sales. And I'd just love for you to talk a little bit about the progress that's being made on reforming defense weapons sales. Obviously, it's an important issue for this committee, for both the ranking member and myself. It's something that we deal with on probably a daily basis, and so I'd love to hear what's going on with that.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. That's a role. I've recently been designated as the point person to take care of that function at the department and work closely with my counterpart at the Department of Defense. I understand that process just takes too long, both the foreign direct military sales and the commercial sales, and that's something I'm definitely going to be looking into and working with my counterparts at State, at Defense, to find opportunities to streamline that process and make it more effective. I think the President's push to have our NATO friends and allies contribute 5% of their GDP to NATO defense spending is going to be a big impetus to streamlining this process as well.
Thank you. My time has expired. I'm now going to recognize Ranking Member Meeks for his 5 minutes of question.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Let me just ask you a quick question. What do you think of the people that work for the State Department, the women and men? Are they good Americans?
Absolutely, sir. This is the 3rd presidential administration I've served in, and each time I've had the privilege of working with some of the most talented and dedicated patriots who want to serve this country. It's never easy to downsize an organization or eliminate offices or bureaus, but we had to put the mission first.
And they make sacrifices for this country, right?
Sure, I think everyone.
They are, they don't carry weapons, but like the men and women of our military, they love this country. They come from, they're Democrats, they're Republicans, they come from all parts, and they basically took this job making great sacrifices even with their families. Is that not correct?
Yes, it is, sir.
And so these are individuals who, and I know when Secretary Rubio was Senator Rubio, we had, conversation. He would always, talk about them in a manner of them doing their job and dedicated to do their jobs. Not that they were not meeting the moment. They were meeting the moment. They were doing what was needed. Would you agree with that?
Certainly.
Okay. So now, let me ask this. Because when Secretary Rubio was here, he said, well, he was in Malaysia, I believe, that he was proud of the department's reorganization. On how it was conducted, he said, quote, "I would argue probably in the most deliberative way of anyone that's done one." Now, to me, that's a bold statement, and so I would hope that you have some things. So let me just ask you, yes or no, did you develop a detailed national security strategy to define what objectives the reorganization should achieve?
Well, thank you. So my understanding is the national security strategy is developed by the National Security Council.
So but you didn't do anything at the state, because the State Department does a number of things that puts our national defense. They help us with that strategy. So at the State Department, was there anything any strategy that defined what the objectives of the reorganization should achieve, so that we know we're moving forward? Did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, the secretary articulated that on his first day on
No,
the
but,
job.
well then, if you did, then it should be something in writing. Can you get us something to this committee to provide, to show us what the national security strategy was?
Sure, I think the secretary provided extreme clarity on that when he said
No, I want to
everything-
see the document that you utilize. So if you have one, please submit that to the committee. The committee have oversight responsibility. I would love to see what the strategic strategy was and how you did these firings. Did you conduct a written analysis looking at the costs and the benefits of your proposed changes?
Sir, I can tell you the thoughtful
It's
analysis
yes or no.
that
Was there an analysis done?
Certainly, I mean, the individuals
So do you have the analysis, sir?
who provided us their input, it was
Do
based
you
on
have
their
an
years of
analysis?
experience.
Do you have an analysis so that we could know what was that analysis looking at the cost and the benefits of the proposed changes? If anybody's doing any work and you're doing something that's really comprehensive, there's an analysis done. You're going to do this. This is the cost. This is why we're doing it. Do you have that in writing, sir?
I don't know if we have it in writing, but I certainly know that analysis was done on.
If you have it, it should be in writing, and I would love to see a copy of it so that we can have it. If there's if not, then I don't know. Let me say, did you conduct a staff survey of the civil service, foreign service, and local nationals who work with us overseas in our embassies?
We did have a portal where we received 650 comments from employees at the Department of State, and every single one of those comments were reviewed and considered, and in fact, some of those comments resulted in changes to the
Was those comments in
reorganization plan.
writing?
Yes.
Okay, could you supply that to the committee also, please?
I don't see why not, sure.
Now, in my opening statement, I said that one of your colleagues boasted in a briefing, this is what I was, to the committee, that the reorganization was developed actually not by talking to everybody, but by fewer than 10 people. That's what he said to us. Fewer than 10 people. Not going around and talking to everyone in that regards. Is that correct? Was his statement correct?
Well, I think there are, 6 undersecretaries? So if you count to the 6 people who are the most senior and most responsible for the various, organizational families at the department, that would be a minimum. And if you add 4 more people to that, I'm not sure how all of the bureaus, you tasked the 6 undersecretaries.
Out of time. I just want to submit this for the record, Mr. Chairman. I have a State Department document of frequently asked questions from May that I'd like to enter into the record. It says, quote, the president assignment of foreign service employees is not a factor for refs.
So ordered.
With that, I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Representative from New Jersey, Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for convening this hearing, and Secretary Rigas, thank you for your testimony and your leadership. A couple of questions. You know, Marco Rubio, Secretary Rubio, gave a very interesting turn of a phrase when he said global spanning NGOs are part of an industrial complex at taxpayers' expense. I thought that was, you know, no matter what the organization is, you got to make sure that the groups that we fund, the taxpayers subsidize, are doing the job and they're doing it efficiently, effectively, and inside the parameters of what the mandates are. So I thought his comment, which I read on the State Department's website, was excellent. Let me ask you a question. You know, you talked about in your testimony about the 1,500 office units in the U.S. For an organization that implements foreign policy. And I'm not sure totally what that means, but I know when I wrote a law back in the year 2004 on microcredit lending, we were trying to help the poorest of the poor, those making less than $1 a day, and we had a great bill, totally bipartisan with my colleagues, and all of a sudden, K Street weighed in and they wanted their cut. And I was outraged by it. And we ended up, when we got it over to the Senate, we lost. They had to get their piece of it at the expense, in my humble opinion, of the poorest of the poor. And I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but, you know, are these people, you know, maybe they mean well, but boy, some of the NGO leaders get unbelievably large salaries, 3 and 4 times what any member of Congress might make. And I wonder about that kind of subsidization for them. So maybe you want to speak to that. And as part of modernizing the department, what steps are being taken to monitor U.S. foreign assistance to avoid waste, fraud, and abuse? If you could speak to that as well. And one last thing that for 4 years, I tried desperately to get information out of the U.S. Department of State and especially USAID about monies that were flowing, not only to PEPFAR, but elsewhere. What are we doing? Who are we subsidizing? How much are they getting? And especially, what are their sub-grantees getting? It was like pulling teeth. I would get these spreadsheets that weren't worth the paper they're printed on. Then I would also ask, as part of the data requests, what are they doing with it? Okay, you just gave $3 million to a sub-grantee. What are they doing with it? Crickets. Could not get it. So I thank you that you're trying, and I thank Secretary Rubio, to really get to some transparency, and we will get to it, because I couldn't get it. I met with Samantha Power, went over and met with her in her office, and very nice person, but I wouldn't get the information. How do you do oversight? And our subcommittee was tasked with that oversight, and we couldn't get it. I have paper trails of all this stuff that doesn't mean anything, frankly, because I don't know what that means. It's like saying, here's the scores of yesterday's game, 8-4. 3-2. Who are they? We had no idea, and what they were actually buying with U.S. taxpayer funds. So the transparency issue is, to me, so extremely important. I know you're focused on that. And finally, just let me ask you if I could. The Deputy Secretary of Management Resources advises the Secretary on the Department's participation in the National Economic Council and interagency economic policy matters. Is that not the role for the Undersecretary for Economic Affairs or the department's chief economist?
So thank you for that question, Congressman. With respect to foreign aid, you know, we've gone through, and I've got a whole list in front of me, and this has been articulated, I think, previously with respect to how money from USAID was being spent on all kinds of things that were completely unjustifiable. What we've proposed in the FY26 budget is the America First Opportunity Fund. I know, you know, got some criticism from the ranking member on that, but I think what that proposes to do is to ensure democratic accountability on how those funds are being spent. You see the president every day in front of the cameras taking questions from the media in the Oval Office, in cabinet meetings, when he's about to get on his plane, when he gets off his plane. He's completely accessible. The secretary is as well. And if anyone wants to ask a question about how foreign assistance money is being spent or how dollars from that fund are being spent to advance America's interests, they have an opportunity every single day to do that. By contrast, how these funds were spent at USAID, nobody knows who to ask why those monies were spent or who made the decision to spend money on, you know, $1 million for voter ID in Haiti. I mean, there's page after page here I have of examples like that. With respect to your question on the role of the Deputy Secretary for Management and Resources, This position provides sort of strategic oversight of the management and resources of how the department conducts its affairs, with oversight, primarily of the M Bureau and of the F Bureau, but really department-wide. These other bureaus and officers are the action officers for those, taking care that that strategy is effectively delivered down the chain of command in what they do every day.
Chair now recognizes Representative Sherman.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'd like to deal with a couple of your comments. You point out that 13 brave American soldiers died in Afghanistan under the Biden administration. I'll point out 65 died under the first Trump administration. And Trump could have signed the unconditional surrender that he signed in 2020 in 2017. Instead, he kept us there, accomplished nothing for our country, provided billions of dollars in weapons to Afghanistan with no plan to recapture them, and most importantly, freed 5,000 bloodthirsty terrorists, and then blames Biden when he leaves him with an Afghanistan that has thousands of American soldiers and 5,000 recently released bloodthirsty terrorists, that the bloodthirsty terrorists try to kill the Americans. But what also concerns me, I represent the Pacific Palisades. Trump came to our district and said, my constituents should sleep outdoors with no aid until our governor changes his policy. And I thought that was the most outrageous thing I'd heard, until I hear that people in Africa should die of AIDS until their government changes how they vote in the United Nations. We just had a big brouhaha on the floor where they couldn't pass a rule. Huge deal here in Congress. And it was about the Epstein files. Mr. Secretary, would it harm American foreign policy if we release the Epstein files, assuming, of course, we redact the names of the victims?
Sir, I have no idea.
So you have no reason to think that it would harm our foreign policy. Carrie Lake was here talking about our broadcasting, and I pointed out that some 354 million people listen every week, or did until you shut it down. And she said, and I'll quote, "Those are government numbers, and I don't trust those numbers." Can we trust the listenership numbers issued by the State Department?
I'm not sure what numbers you're referring to, sir.
Those are the numbers of people listening every week to Voice of America and its sisters.
Well,
Issued by the State Department?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that
Well, I'll
statement.
point out that not only were those numbers released under the Biden administration, but very similar numbers were released under the Trump administration. So Carrie Lake was sitting there saying we couldn't trust Trump administration government numbers. Can we trust Trump administration government numbers?
Sir, I'd have to.
You're the management guy.
Right, I'd have to look at what numbers you're referring
Okay.
to. I haven't had
Officially
an opportunity
released government. No, okay. Secretary Rubio sat right there and told us no one had died as a result of the cuts to our foreign aid. Does the State Department stand by that conclusion? No one's died?
I would stand by Secretary Rubio's statement, sir, yes.
Okay, well, we have behind me the first to die, the first child to die, because you cut off his AIDS medicine. But we're going to have 3.3 million people die as a result. And not only do we have that, we have the effect that cutting off aid does to migration, but also to diseases that affect us here in the United States. Because most of those 3.3 million people are going to die because of tuberculosis, malaria, and AIDS. And every time someone in another country contracts one of those diseases, it's a chance for that disease to replicate, mutate, and migrate back here. So we're going to have a lot of deaths in America, not only the 3.3 million deaths there. Now, you recently, I think it was today, that 500 metric tons of emergency food reached its expiration date, and it's set to be burned. Was there a reason why food that was acquired even before the beginning of this administration now has to be burned because you didn't send it to starving people in Sudan and elsewhere?
Sir, I'm not familiar with that particular story, but My understanding is it is the policy of the government to not distribute expired food or medicine.
Isn't it a huge management catastrophe to have food sit there in the warehouse for 5 and 6 months waiting for its expiration date and never ship it overseas to starving people? Isn't that a huge management problem?
I'd have to look at what the issue is. Obviously, I don't know how long that food was there or when it was due to expire.
Before Trump got there, and now you're going to burn it. It's hard to say that that's good management. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize Representative Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Deputy Secretary Rigas, I certainly appreciate your commitment, the Secretary's commitment, and the President's commitment to always advance the interests of the United States as you look to reform the State Department, which is patriotic work and honors hardworking taxpayers. As you said, you're cognizant that every dollar you spend, every program we fund comes from the labor of tax-paying American families. I can't tell you how many hardworking Kentucky taxpayers ask me why on earth did we fund some of the programs that we saw coming out of the USAID. And it's not just waste, it's that these expenditures in many cases were counterproductive. They were outlays that were directly at odds with American interests. And so I welcome your testimony that we're finally shining a light on the fact that countries that benefit from our generosity often fail to reciprocate that support, citing sub-Saharan African nations who vote only 29% of the time on UN resolutions with the United States, despite receiving billions in assistance paid for by the American people. Now, you've heard the criticism of these reforms, so I want to give you an opportunity to respond to the following that we all hear. Well, if we withdraw from the space, if we leave, even in these difficult, lesser developed countries where, yes, we do have diplomatic challenges, if we just leave, then China will fill the void, that the Belt and Road or our adversaries will fill the void. Mr. Deputy Secretary, does it advance U.S. interests to continue to throw good money after bad to countries that actually cozy up to our adversaries and don't do what we want at the United Nations?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. No, it certainly does not advance America's national interest to do that. I think what we're trying to do is tie any foreign assistance to measurable outcomes that deliver for the American people, that make them safer, stronger, or more prosperous. A lot of the so-called aid that China has delivered to countries has really been predatory lending that has not been, that has put countries into debt traps, which they now regret. So I think, and the aid that we have, the so-called aid that has been delivered previously by the government of the United States through USAID has been things that the governments did not want, did not need, and was often promoting divisive ideologies in those countries.
And true or false, after the proposed budget is implemented and the streamlining and reforms go into effect, the United States will remain the largest single foreign aid donor in the world by a wide margin.
By a wide margin, that is correct, sir.
Let's take one example of U.S. aid funding under the previous administration. Under the Biden administration, U.S. aid provided over $500,000 to empower Uganda's LGBT community to push back against their own government's policy, and another $5.5 million grant to shift public perception and attitudes in Uganda, a very socially conservative place, towards LGBT acceptance and train LGBT individuals on the skills needed to engage in the economy. As a result of that policy, Uganda agreed to a deal with China to finance a $5 billion oil pipeline. Was that foreign assistance to fight this country, Uganda, was that in the interest of American national security to push that country towards China?
No, I think anything that we did, that the prior administration did to push countries into China's arms were certainly not in the interest of the United States.
No, so it's not just about honoring our taxpayers, it's about advancing American interests. And there may be differences of opinion here in Congress about a particular country's views on a particular social topic. But I think that the job of the State Department is to advance American interests. And that's why I am so grateful to you, the Secretary, the President, for reimagining our foreign assistance programs and prioritizing what is in the interests of this country, not other countries. I don't have any more time, but I just want to reiterate. This is the right thing to do, and I think American soft power will not only persist under this administration, but it will actually work under this administration. I yield back.
Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Representative Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Trump, after years of having what he termed pleasant and friendly conversation with his friend, the person he admired as a genius, President Putin, suddenly realized he was being played for a fool. And he, indeed, his words, realizes that Putin was giving him a whole lot of bullshit during that time, and that Russia was continuing to bomb innocent civilians, women and children, in the process, and he changed his policy in that regard. And so I want to ask you this question. Why did you fire the entire team investigating war crimes committed by Russia in Ukraine? Why were those people fired?
Sir, I believe that office was consolidated, and the work of that office, it will be conducted by the Regional Bureau and by the staff at posts overseas.
Now, all of this is fine. People are let go from there that we're assisting. I worked with the prosecutor from Ukraine as they were training their own people to deal with these. Here's the kind of crimes they've been committing. They've been committing serial rapes of teenagers by Russian soldiers. They were targeting maternity wards of hospitals. They were targeting emergency responders coming to give medical care to these innocent people that were being attacked. They committed torture of the worst kind against innocent civilians in communities like Bucha. They also took 20,000 children, abducted them from their families. Who knows where they are now? These are the kind of crimes that they're committing. And accountability. I mean, this administration, I guess, is talking a lot about accountability for teenagers undergoing sexual assaults. Well, what about here? What about what happened here? Making cuts in that area right now is critical in terms of helping Putin use terror against civilians to continue this. I just can't see the priorities of however you call cutting, reorganizing down, it's the same thing. You're taking a team that was there working for years, helping accountability occur. That's so important after this war is finally over to have this happen. Now, you've also consolidated, whatever terms you want to use, you've eliminated 2 offices in the Bureau of Counterterrorism and Violent Extremism. And this is at a time when at home, you're saying these are the greatest threats we have. Whatever small increment of money there is that could have helped that, play it against the billions of dollars that are being used now by our government. Lastly, in this great bill that was just passed, I say it sarcastically, and the money that was spent there, going around taking people off the streets with no criminal background, no violence, but you don't have enough money to counter the violent extremism that's coming from other countries. I mean, no wall can stop some of that effect here as a threat. People work and aspire people here to get involved. But you're cutting in that area is so short-sighted if you're really worried about protecting the American people as a whole against violent extremism all the way from ISIS to Al-Qaeda. So those are the areas you're cutting. You're cutting in areas dealing with our NATO allies, our greatest asset that not only Russia, but we have our greatest asset against China that they don't have. And you're cutting in those areas as well. So you're looking at all these areas, taking great pride in making these incremental cuts and saying you're just reorganizing when indeed you're cutting. And your rationale is we're making America safer. Well, you're not being good stewards, in your words, of Americans in terms of their safety. You're not being good stewards in terms of the threat from violent extremism. You're not being good stewards in terms of the threat of to the American people with Russia. And indeed, you're not being good stewards with what's going to happen when China views the actions of the U.S. in this regard and comes in, not only makes their influence greater, but makes their threat to the American people greater as well. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I found the comments amazing. I wouldn't be sarcastic about cutting Americans' taxes, which is what the big, beautiful bill was, while being serious about sending their money abroad. That seems very misguided to me. I now recognize Representative Kim.
Mr. Chair, since you said that, I wouldn't be so cavalier about putting $5 trillion of debt to pay for that for our
This is a
children and
government that
grandchildren.
spends way too much money, and I thank the Secretary for working to take care of that, especially with dollars being sent abroad to other places, foreign countries, foreign NGOs, foreign terrorist organizations. But if you want to be sarcastic about cutting the taxes of Americans to do those things, that to me seems cavalier.
I'll just let it rise, other than to say the things
would
I
let that
addressed in
go.
my remarks were about threats to Americans. I'll let
Probably
it go.
wise to let that go. Representative Kim is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank Secretary for joining us today. On May 29, 2025, this year, the committee received notification of the department's intent to reorganize its domestic operations and functions. As part of this reorganization, the department is eliminating the Bureau of Energy Resources, or ENR. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. And also in testimony before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in May, Secretary Rubio stated, "Energy is going to be at the forefront of foreign policy for the next 100 years. And we just don't produce enough global energy to meet the AI demand." I wholeheartedly agree with that. So if energy policy will be at the forefront of our foreign policy for the next 100 years, as Secretary Rubio projects, and we know energy diplomacy is essential to meet our future AI demands, can you talk to us why there is a need to eliminate the Bureau of Energy Resources?
Sir, thank you for that. Thank you for that question, Congresswoman. So the bureau, that bureau has been consolidated into the Undersecretary for Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment. So those functions continue to remain. Our commitment to energy development and energy dominance are one of the central themes of the President's administration. This is just simply a consolidation of that bureau into the larger
It wasn't a
economic bureau.
criticism or anything. As you know, I chaired the subcommittee on the E-family, so we welcome the opportunity to work on that issue. And I just had my subcommittee hearing on breaking the choke point of the China's dominance on critical minerals, rare earth elements. I mean, these are so important issues. So I look forward to that opportunity, and hopefully I can work with you and your office in meeting those demands. But in 1980, moving on, the Foreign Commercial Service was pulled out of the Department of Commerce that was transferred to Commerce to elevate the importance of commercial diplomacy. But looking at the last few decades, the opposite has occurred, in my view. The move divorced commercial diplomacy from our foreign policy and limited the ability, or our ability, to help American businesses access the foreign markets and protect them from predatory practices. Our focus should be helping our American businesses, especially abroad, especially in the region, in the Indo-Pacific, especially with the diplomatic tools in the toolkit, in the box that's available. So as we are working to reauthorize the State Department, we are considering a proposal to bring the FCS back into the department. So would you support such a move?
I'd be happy to work with the committee on that proposal. I think our engagement with countries. I think the president has really led the way on that with his trip to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, where he showed the importance of economic diplomacy. Obviously, there are other equities, other departments that may have a say in that, but I'd be happy to weigh in about the importance of
I
that
hope
work.
you can weigh in strongly, and as you do and consider our proposal, you will allow my team to work with yours and then make that transfer back to state. I hope it does as seamless as possible. So I hope you can commit to working with my team on that.
Yes.
Okay. And in April, there were reports that the department was considering closing its consulate office in Busan, South Korea. South Korea, as you know, is a very critical ally of the United States, and they share our concerns about North Korean aggression, expanding the Chinese influence, and especially in the economic and military areas, and Russia influence in the Indo-Pacific, especially the north areas. So what is the status of that proposed closure of the U.S. consulate office in Busan, or is there such a proposal to actually eliminate that consulate office from Busan, South Korea?
Thank you for that question. So I don't believe there is any proposal to close any facilities overseas. I do know that there was an analysis that was done earlier this year, which reviewed every post overseas, its costs, its benefit, what services it was providing, any revenue it was generating. Consular services in particular generates a fair amount of revenue for the department.
Is there any other areas, the U.S. consulates in East Asia and the Pacific region, that is under consideration?
So I don't think it's fair to frame it as any post being under consideration for closure. I think an analysis was done or a sort of a data call was done and asked people to assess different posts overseas. But as of now, there are no plans to close any facilities.
Got it. Looks like my time's up. Thank you so much. I yield
you.
back.
Chair now recognizes Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the Atlantic article from yesterday that Mr. Chairman was referring to.
So ordered.
In that article, and we'll make sure you get a copy, Secretary Riggs, it talks about 500 tons of emergency aid, high-energy biscuits that are going to get incinerated. Now, I come from the private sector. We spent $800,000 on shipping that aid over, and it was stored in warehouses in the Middle East. We're going to spend another $130,000 to incinerate those biscuits that have been sitting there. That, to me, does not seem like a good financial investment, since those were already sunk costs. We should have gotten that food to save lives of kids. We've not met before. I don't know you, so I'll take you as an honest public servant. I appreciate that you described the folks that work for the State Department, for USAID, as talented and patriotic Americans. They are talented and patriotic Americans. I've traveled across this world, gone into refugee camps, gone into conflict zones in Africa and in Asia and elsewhere, and you see these men and women, these diplomats, these civil servants out there doing their work every day, and I think it's reprehensible how they've been treated. Again, I'm not arguing if you want to do a reorganization, if you want to go through section by section, program by program, but how these folks have been treated in terms of being laid off one day, saying, hey, come back the next day, being laid off the next day, you're going to lose a ton of talent, these folks that are at the peak of their career. And when we try to rebuild these organizations, even if they're streamlined and elsewhere, these folks are not coming back because of how poorly they've been treated. And that is extremely unfortunate. And to folks that are watching out there, I am sorry that you were treated that way. You guys are, as the Secretary said, talented and patriotic Americans. I appreciate that this country has changed now. I'm a doctor by training. Part of what led me into public service was growing up in the 70s and 80s and seeing what we did when we saw commercials of babies in Africa starving to death, swollen bellies, flies on their eyes. We didn't just sit around. We're a faith-based country. I appreciate the chairman has us recite the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God. This is not what a faith-based country does. I talk to faith-based aid organizations all the time. We're a benevolent country of abundance. Our values are saying, those folks that are dying out there, even if their governments don't agree with us, even if their governments don't vote for us, we don't want to see kids die. Is that who we are? Are we going to change who we are as a country? That isn't what I believe that I believe in. I think this is a great nation, the United States of America. I think we're a nation that has been blessed. And I think we have a responsibility to lead the rest of the world based on our values. I understand, I've heard my colleagues on the other side, and in your opening testimony, you said, well, this is no longer about being out there benevolent and saving lives. This is about trade, not aid. I hope that's not who we become as a country. I hope we are not now saying, okay, well, we'll go out and save those kids' lives, but you know what? Here's what you got to do in return for that. Again, that's not the America that I believe in. We designed a system that both supported American farmers, supported our economy, saved lives, put food out there, put medicines out there. Mr. Sherman's correct. Millions of people are going to die around the world because we're not there, because of the vacuum. Secretary, do you know what percentage of our budget goes, the United States budget goes to foreign aid? Is it more or less than 5%?
Oh, it's certainly less than 5%.
Is it less than 2%?
Yeah, I believe it's less than 1% of the total foreign budget. I think
It is less than 1% of our budget. So if we spend less than 1% of our budget, but we actually do good work around the world, we save lives. I've been to refugee camps where I see that American flag and it says, from the people of the United States. I've gone into villages post the Ebola crisis where they greet us and they're cheering us and they're saying, thank you to the people of the United States. You saved our lives. That is what we do. That is what this is about. That is who we were blessed to be as the United States of America. I don't want to be China. I don't want to be Russia. The way they operate is purely transactional, and they don't do it for the betterment of the world. The world that we've created post-World War II, the United States of America, we damn well better be proud of it, and I am extremely disappointed that what is happening under this administration is going to leave us weaker and less benevolent and more transactional. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bear. I think you speak, true to your heart. We've traveled together, we've been together. I think it's always an important thing as we look at the budget, and I think we can all acknowledge it's less than 1%, but it's still a borrowed 1% that we are dealing with. It's a 1% that we have to go out there and ask somebody else for money for. And just reflecting personally, most of us don't go out there and ask our local banks for a loan so that we can give that loan away. And it's something that we have to wrestle with as Americans as we deal with our budget. And I appreciate your thoughts on the issue.
I'll just make one comment. I completely agree with your comments, Congressman. The life-saving humanitarian assistance has been exempted from the Secretary's Foreign Assistance Review, so that aid would continue to flow. I think we're looking at all of these other examples that are not this life-saving kind of humanitarian assistance. And even to the extent that we are providing that aid, there has to be some kind of graduation strategy so that 1 year, 3 years, 5 years down the road, these countries are able to assume that obligation themselves for their populations.
But don't incinerate food aid that is out there, like the aid that is in warehouses, et cetera. Deliver that aid to folks before it spoils. Yeah, it's going to cost a little bit to sign those contracts and so forth, but let's not, those are sunk costs. Get that food to folks and let's save those lives.
Chair now recognizes Representative Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to Deputy Secretary Rigas for being here today. As we evaluate the work that's being done at the U.S. State Department, it's vital that America's global health programs continue to prioritize American innovation. I look forward to hearing how the State Department is continuing to implement U.S. global health priorities that protect all Americans. The State Department has an integral role to play in implementing global health programs like PEPFAR. Can you provide an update on the status of PEPFAR transition planning to partner country ownership?
Sure. Thank you for that question, Congressman. About 85% of the funds for PEPFAR for direct care is what we requested in the budget. The 15% that was not requested are for countries that we assess have the ability to execute those programs on their own. There's an overall 54% cut for administrative non-direct care funds for PEPFAR. But again, as I mentioned, like the 15% reduction represents our philosophy that as countries are able to administer these programs themselves, they should be taking on that responsibility.
When will effective transition planning for partner country ownership for PEPFAR begin to move forward? And if conducted on a country-by-country basis, what countries do you plan to assess first?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. I think that is, I'd have to refer that question to the Bureau administering the program to get their assessment on which countries are sort of further up the chain when it comes to their ability to administer the program, but we would certainly start there with those who are most able to carry out the delivery of the aid.
And America's innovative companies have long been a cornerstone of America's global health efforts. Could you share how programs like PEPFAR and Gavi can utilize American products to ensure effective solutions to global health problems?
Sure, we are leading the world when it comes to innovation in pharmaceuticals and life-saving treatments, not just for Americans, for people all over the world. When it comes to PEPFAR, I think that's been a great example of how aid has been delivered. But the second letter in PEPFAR, the E, stands for emergency. And this was an emergency program implemented over 20 years ago. And I think we need to ask ourselves, how long can a program be an emergency, and when can we sort of move to a graduation strategy where countries can begin to take this responsibility on themselves and to move into a more normal kind of environment.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Representative Olszewski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you, Deputy Secretary Rigas, for your time and for your service. I did hear in your confirmation hearing that your father spent over 25 years as a public school teacher.
That's right.
Please thank him for his service as a former public school teacher myself.
Oh, thank you, I will.
Colleagues, as we know, the administration claimed to shut down USAID, and while we can sit here and debate whether or not the process was legal, we can debate whether it was warranted, what we don't want to do is debate facts. And so a few weeks ago, Secretary Rubio wrote a eulogy of sorts for USAID. Unfortunately, it was a lie-filled mess. So I wanted to ask you, Mr. Rigas, as the Chief Operating Officer of the State Department, I want to get your feedback on a few of the statements in that document. The first claim from Secretary Rubio was that, quote, USAID had a near infinite taxpayer budget. Is that a statement that you agree with and support?
I think when you look at the spending that was taken, that the USAID department undertook, it's hard to justify how a lot of those dollars were spent unless people felt that there were no more important uses for those dollars than some of the, frankly, very wasteful spending that was done.
Okay, and I think as a member of this committee, I'd be more than welcome the opportunity to talk about how we could best spend those resources. But for me, it's just interesting that he would say that, considering back in 2017, he said, quote, foreign aid as a part of the overall budget. I know this just came up with the ranking member, is less than 1% of the total amount. I think you guys just talked about that and agreed. And anyone who tells you that we can slash foreign aid and it will bring us to balance is lying to you. So just, it might be a small number, we might disagree on how it's spent, but it certainly doesn't sound like near infinite to me. A second claim that Secretary Rubio made was that, quote, USAID marketed its programs as charity rather than instruments of American foreign policy intended to advance our national interests. Is that something you would support in terms of a statement about USAID?
I think if you look at sort of the mindset that, how else could you describe the mindset that would inform some of the spending that was done that was not life-saving humanitarian aid, but was kind of all of this social engineering spending that was not advancing American interests, and even the host countries themselves were not asking for it. Someone described it to me as sort of a reverse robbery where we hold a gun to their head and tell them to take our money. That's not a way to sort of conduct foreign foreign assistance, I don't think.
Okay, I appreciate that. Again, contradicting himself, Secretary Rubio's past remarks was that foreign aid is not charity, and it is, quote, critical to our national security, not a one-off statement. He's also said that if we give foreign aid because it is a, quote, cost-effective way to further our national interests. And I just want to share, in light of the deep cuts that's being proposed, I don't think there's a way to continue advancing those national interests, again, even if we disagree about any specific program. Another claim from Secretary Rubio was that, quote, USAID had little to show since the end of the Cold War. Is that a statement that you would agree with in terms of his assertions?
I think I would. I mean, I'd like to know what American national interest that made America safer, stronger, or more prosperous could be tied to spending that was done by USAID.
Okay. Well, again, I appreciate your response, but that claim is news to me. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce for the record an article and a study from Lancet that shows from 2011, which was after the Cold War, until 2021, USAID supported efforts to have helped prevent more than 91 million deaths, including 30 million deaths among children. In 2000, more than 1 in 4 people lived in extreme poverty. Today, that number is fewer than 1 in 10. And again, that's thanks in large part to USAID-led economic development programs. So I would argue that's not little to show, that's actually quite a bit.
The Secretary did exempt the humanitarian and life-saving assistance from his foreign aid review. So that kind of assistance, I think, would continue, but I think we'd want to see some kind of graduation strategy.
Again, I think it just will be hard to graduate when we are absolutely gutting all of that, including those economic development programs, which has, as I understand it, very little congressional oversight. It's one big lump sum with little oversight. So as I've said countless times on this committee, I am all for reform. I'm willing to work with anyone to make sure our taxpayer dollars are used effectively. But as we think about the future of foreign assistance, we want to make sure that we're telling the truth about what's happening to the American people and being real about what the numbers represent and what that might limit us in being able to do. So again, I thank you for your time today, and Mr. Chairman, my time is up, and so I will yield back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, for being here with us today. State Department has over 1,500 domestic offices in the United States, all for a department that, as Benjamin Franklin on the wall up there, was meant for foreign policy. Can you elaborate on your plans to merge, eliminate, consolidate these offices?
So thank you for that question, Congressman. So the reorganization, which we just sort of began to execute on Friday, will eliminate 100 offices, merge another 100 or so offices, so that the key functions that we want to continue will continue under a combined office. We do have a number of, in federal buildings all over the country, you've got folks who are processing or taking applications for passports and whatnot, but it does seem that we do have probably more offices than we need for a foreign policy department in the United States.
And could you comment, and I'll leave it an open question, on your plans to downsize your workforce? How is that going to be accomplished?
So what
end?
Yes. So what we just did, we did the most complicated reduction in force that the federal government has ever seen, and we did that in consultation with the Office of Personnel Management. I believe we had over 173 competitive areas. And what a competitive area is an office that performs a function. And what we were able to do is, when you're combining two offices, it is personnel agnostic. So individuals who lost their jobs there was no individual who was targeted. We asked the undersecretaries to say, what are the functions that you need to carry out this, the mission here, and what positions do you need to do that? And once those positions are identified, you then take all the employees who are in that competitive area and you basically compete them against one another based on their seniority, their tenure, their skills, and those with the highest ranking scores are the ones who are retained, and those with the lowest ranking scores are the ones that do not make the, once you reach the complement or whatever it is, 50 people that you need in office or 20, the top 20 remain and the remainder do not. So even though there were, certainly people who were qualified and great patriots who were separated from service, what you can take comfort in knowing is that the people who remained actually were selected using merit systems principles to actually have ranked as higher quality in terms of tenure, in terms of experience, in terms of skills to be able to carry out the mission.
So I think I just heard the description of a meritocracy.
Yes.
Along those lines, though, budget and planning actually coordinates with the Office of U.S. Foreign Assistance Resources in developing policy plans, programs to achieve our goals. But we have heard that decision-making is slowed down due to budget functions being spread across the M family, which includes budget and planning, and the Office of Foreign Assistance. Can you describe how you're going to streamline those offices together to meet your goals?
Yes. So that's an excellent point, and that's actually one of the key objectives of the reorganization is taking all of these management support offices, which were spread out among the undersecretariats and even further down among all of the bureaus and offices within each undersecretariat family, and moving them up into one sort of EX bureau within each of the undersecretariats, and then moving most of those management functions over to, shockingly, the management bureau of the department. So they are the one place where most of these functions will be executed. So you won't have redundant offices throughout the department executing on the same mission.
Very good. And in the last minute that I have, can you talk about examples of feedback you got from the workforce during your drawdown planning?
Yes, thank you. We got over 650 comments from the workforce, and these were really very thoughtful comments, which showed the experience that the workforce had, both among the Foreign Service and the Civil Service, and the care that they took and the thought that they put into how things ought to work based on their experience, describing pain points that they had in their work, how it was difficult to execute on the mission, where they thought we could improve. And all of those comments were reviewed, considered, and a number of them were implemented or were used to revise what the initial reorganization plan was.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Representative Dean.
I thank the chairman, I thank the ranking member, and I thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. Since his return to office in January, President Trump has chosen to bully our foreign partners rather than to negotiate. This administration has claimed their policies will bring safety, security, and prosperity to America. But all I have seen thus far is weakened relationships with our allies and emboldened adversaries. Friday's termination of 1,300 State Department employees, I would risk to say heroes, patriots, decades of experience and specialized technical expertise will only make us worse off. Combined, they have hundreds of years of experience, expertise, sacrifice, and work, and they got a note on Friday, you're done. Secretary Rubio has repeatedly said, addressing the threat to China is our national security interests. Yet the same day he was in Southeast Asia, lauding the cooperation that will come from future engagements, the entire team that prepared him for his trip were fired. Offices that were responsible for ensuring arms control and nonproliferation of weapons of mass destruction by our adversaries, gutted. As we struggle with drug smuggling at our borders and deaths in our communities, the department fired those who were working to interdict drugs at foreign borders before they would get to our own. Those who were fired were essential to our national security. They were selfless public servants who swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. I so regret the action that your department took. They negotiated key agreements for our global stability. They ensured threats do not reach our borders. They sacrificed their own safety and time with their families, all in service to us, the United States of America. I believe the administration has actively betrayed them, and we in turn have lost experts who were quietly and faithfully keeping us safe. Secretary Rigas, how is any of this improving the safety and security for America?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. With respect to the office that prepared the secretary for his trip overseas, so none of the country offices were affected, and none of the
People who
foreign.
prepped him were terminated.
So that
Thank you.
was
That
the-
doesn't make us safer.
Yeah,
Thank you.
there was.
That's such a non sequitur.
Yeah.
That does not make us safer. You fired 1,300 people, the very team who prepped him as he was in Asia. I want to follow up on what the ranking member said in his line of questions, and I look forward to you sharing the 600 respondents. Where did that survey go? To whom did it go? And to whom did it go back? 600 respondents.
Yes, so it
Who
went.
sent it out and who got it?
It was a department-wide email distribution asking all employees, Foreign Service, Civil Service, for
So
their.
how many people received that email? Everybody?
Yeah, yeah, that's
Every
my
single person.
understanding. That's my
It's your
understanding.
understanding. I've spoken to people. They didn't receive it. It's your understanding? It went to everybody? Who sent it out? Did you send it?
I did not send it out. It was sent out by staff.
Sent out by staff.
It was a global distribution list, so I'd be curious as to someone saying they didn't get that email.
And, okay, we look forward to seeing exactly the distribution list and who wrote back, because I have a wonder, I bet they didn't write and say, I think you need to can 1,300 people on Friday. Let's talk and shift to Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the newly formed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Do you agree that the American people deserve to know where their taxpayer dollars are being spent and for what policy objectives they're being used?
Certainly.
Do you know that all foreign assistance programs are required to conduct risk assessments for funding they will administer?
That sounds right to me.
It's true. Nevertheless, it has been reported that the State Department waived 9 mandatory counterterrorism and anti-fraud safeguards to rush the $30 million award in simply 5 days for this startup, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Sound like the right way to go about that?
I'm not familiar with this particular situation, but I'd be happy to look
You're
into it.
familiar with the famine, the deprivation in Gaza, the fact that other programs are there, like Mrs. Cindy McCain World Food Program, that have been working faithfully there for a very long time, not to mention UNRWA. 5 days, $30 million grant, and they waved through 9 mandatory counterterrorism reviews. Do you think that's efficient and effective?
I'd have to look at that particular situation.
I would think you would
My
want
only
to. It's within your purview. It's
Right.
$30 million.
Yeah, I'd
Let
have
me
to-
move on.
Sure.
This organization has been rejected by humanitarian and human rights organization. It's proving to be a death trap for Gazans. Do you know that, and I want to ask as I end here, I recognize my time is up, Mr. Chairman, nearly 900 Gazans have been shot and killed desperately seeking food in some of these aid areas.
The chair
Thousands.
will remind members that you're more than welcome to put a question in writing through the chair, and that
And I will
be
seek
submitted.
more questions. I seek unanimous consent to enter onto the record. May I tell you what I have?
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
an article.
2 articles. Gaza, 875 people confirmed dead trying to source food in recent weeks. And then a Reuters article, former
Ordered.
Doge employees rushed grant to Trump-backed Gaza aid group over staff objections.
So ordered.
Thank you.
With that, gentlelady's time has expired. With that, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. McKenzie, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Deputy Secretary, thank you for being here today. And I'd like to start by thanking you for all the tremendous work that you're doing at the department. I will just speak for myself and our office. The constituent services that have been provided are exceptional. We have contacted your office and the department a number of times to help with particular passport and immigration-related issues, and just can't thank you enough for, again, the incredible work. Regardless of any changes or anything you've made, the impact that I can say for my constituents and our office is exceptional. So really tremendous job that you and the department are doing there. We have heard great things about the online renewal process for passports. The one area, and it's not necessarily a new issue, it's something that has been going on for years, is a small category relating to P2 visas for internationally recognized entertainers. We have a number of cultural events in our local community things from Music Fest to the Ukrainian Homestead Festival, where these international entertainers want to come into our community for just short periods of time, do their work, provide great entertainment, cultural experiences for those in our community. But unfortunately, they have been many times getting hung up and then ultimately missing the one event that they're looking to be able to possibly attend or perform at. So just want to talk to you about what you might be able to do to help us speed up and improve that process for P2 visas.
Thank you for that question, Congressman. I'd be happy to look into any specific issue you have with that visa or any particular case. But if there are issues with that visa, I'm happy to take that on board.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, this is the type of action that we've seen out of the Trump administration the entire time that you've been there, is your willingness to tackle these issues. And the staffing and funding that you're looking for, I think, is the right-sized approach for putting American priorities first around the world, but also making sure that our constituents back home are getting the services they need. So I want to thank you again for all the work that you and the Trump administration are doing, and look forward to continuing to work with you. We'll follow up after the hearing. Thank you again.
Thank you, Congressman.
Gentleman yields back. With that, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Jackson, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Thank you so much for your time in coming out today. To start this series of questions, I'd like to ask you, could you please furnish for us a definition of woke? What does woke mean?
Well, sir, I mean, I think in popular parlance, there's a lot of people have a lot of different definitions for that word.
Your definition, please.
I don't know that I have a definition.
Okay. Do you find something particularly offensive about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Do you think it should be illegal?
I think how it's been applied, sir, seems to have been in violation of American civil rights law.
Okay, well, that's incorrect. But let me get on to my other questioning. This administration has made no secret of its hostility towards diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, shutting them down, not just at the State Department, but across the federal government. That's your prerogative, as you know. Even if many of us believe, as a co-equal branch of government, we believe that it undermines our national security and weakens our diplomatic corps. But let's talk about the implications of your obsession with diversity, equity, and inclusion over diplomacy. As you well know, federal and foreign and civil service officers rotate assignments. A career official could have landed in a job focused on increasing recruitment that was required by law and retention of a diverse workforce through a standard assignment in a general cycle, which is hardly a political assignment. In fact, working to ensure that the department's workforce reflects the America it represents sounds very patriotic to me. It's an asset that the United States has. I want to ask you, before this massive firing took place, what safeguards were in place to protect career officers from being targeted for removal simply because they served in a portfolio this administration now deems politically undesirable?
So the functions, the offices and bureaus that were eliminated, some offices were eliminated, some offices were combined that were duplicative and
But what was the criteria?
Overlapping functions. If they were not sort of a core foreign policy mission of the United States, that's, I think, one of the #1 criteria, or if it was an office that no longer was relevant.
All right, well, let me go forward, if you don't mind, in the interest of time that we have, because I was getting a bit of word salad, couldn't figure out what you were saying. I know you to be an upstanding and lawful abiding citizen. Section 5403 of the 2022 NDAA strengthens recruitment of underrepresented groups, mandating outreach to universities, employee affinity groups, and expanding paid student internships, among other actions. But now, under Secretary Rubio's leadership, which is substantially different than Senator Rubio's leadership, employee affinity groups are not allowed to meet, outreach efforts are paused, and critical recruitment programs like the Payne Fellowship have now been terminated. When you talk about replacing diversity, equity, inclusion, has anyone been removed from the Franklin Fellowship program in the State Department?
I am not familiar with the membership of the different programs at the department and who's in them and who's not.
Okay, well, they have not. I hope you would look into that next time. Can you tell us more about the Franklin Fellowship program, on why that program has been protected and preserved? Isn't that a specialty interest group?
Sir, I could get back to you with information on that. My understanding is these affinity groups are sort of employee generated.
I'm being
They're
very
not-
specific about Franklin,
the
the one group that has expanded during this time
Yeah,
period.
my understanding is that's an affinity group that is founded by employees and whose membership is managed by those employees themselves. It's not a official State Department organization. It's my understanding. I might be wrong, but I don't
Yep,
think
your
it
understanding is incorrect at this point. I hope you would refresh yourself on that. Section 504 of that bill requires that the Secretary of State to reward and advance officials that promote diversity and inclusion. But under Secretary Ruber, the department has abolished the performance evaluation criteria. Do you agree with that?
That was feedback we also got from a number of career Foreign Service officers, that they felt that their language skills, their foreign service skills were not being adequately considered for promotion, and that...
So I would ask you, why are you not carrying out the law? It's real simple. I've got a very basic line. To follow the law, this is the law. Will you respect the law?
Oh, well, absolutely, sir. If you want to let me know which particular law you think is not being faithfully executed, I'd be happy to look into that.
5404.
Okay. I'd be happy to look into that, sir.
Thank you, sir. I yield back at this time. Thank you for coming out.
Gentleman yields back. With that, the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Shreve, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Deputy Secretary Rigas. A couple points of feedback. Your department did an extraordinary job for my office and on behalf of a constituent in Columbus, Indiana, over the weekend in getting a visa. Had a constituent whose wife had a heart attack, young wife, over in Kenya. And he hustled to get over there, and in the middle of the weekend, the department turned around a visa as he was in flight to Orly, or De Gaulle, to get on to Kenya. So I think constituents very much appreciate that continued level of service on behalf of the department. I think your stated focus on trade over aid sells with the constituents that I represent in the 6th District of Indiana, and so I appreciate that. You noted in your opening comments that you'd completed the folding of U.S. AID in the state just 15 days ago. But of course, you've got decades of legislative directives and instructions, authorized assistance programs that you've got to work with in, as part of the Foreign Assistance Program public laws. This must, I would think, materially impede your desired use of U.S. foreign assistance. If you agree with that, if you had your ways, how would you reorient, restructure U.S. foreign assistance if you were untethered?
So I think what the Secretary's articulated and the President himself is that foreign assistance should be tied to an American foreign policy objective or a presidential foreign policy priority, and that we should be able to, there should be some kind of return on investment, whether it's going to make America safer or it's going to make America stronger or it's going to make America more prosperous. You know, I just spoke at the Foreign Assistance class at the Foreign Service Institute about 2 weeks ago, which was actually based on some of the feedback we got from Congress when we were briefing on the reorganization. They thought we had to do more training on that, so I went out and spoke to the first class. And I got a question about could we provide foreign assistance for job development or job training? And my response would be, you know, that the way you could justify something like that is if we want to make a trade deal with a country and they're concerned that this trade deal is going to negatively impact the population of that country, you say, hey, if we can spend $1 million on job training, where it's going to generate $10 million or $100 million in net economic benefit to the United States, then to me that's a good return on investment. You say we spend $1 million, but we got $100 million back for American businesses, or we created jobs here in the United States. So that's the kind of investment opportunity we want to make. We want to help countries help us, or if it comes to remigration, helping countries that want to be a safe third country for folks, or want to take back folks who've come illegally to the United States but don't have the capacity. We can help them potentially do that as well. So they're relieving a potential economic burden that might be coming from folks who are on U.S. assistance, and helping them return back safely to a safe country.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your service and that of so many people that you work with. I know that those cuts had to be painful, but you're not spending your own money. And so I appreciate the work that you've undertaken and are playing through. With that, I yield back.
Representative yields back. With that, Representative McBride is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Secretary, for joining us today, for your testimony, for your patience as we go through the list. As we've talked about throughout the course of this hearing, over 1,300 State Department employees were removed from their jobs last week. I'm curious if you're aware that these layoffs reduced the staff at the office to monitor and combat trafficking in persons by 71%?
Yes.
Okay. Have we seen a 71% reduction in human trafficking globally?
My understanding is the responsibility of most of the folks who were reduced were actually writing reports. They were not actually engaging in the field as Foreign Service officers.
Is there not a role for individuals, employees of the State Department, to be able to monitor and understand the full scope of the human trafficking crisis?
Oh, certainly, yeah. That function continues to remain. We do have people continuing to write reports, but there was just an excessive number of folks who were writing reports.
So 71% of this office was useless?
I would say there was a number of redundant functions. I'd be happy to give you a list of the positions that were eliminated.
I would appreciate that.
Sure.
I would appreciate a list, because I do think it boggles the mind and defies belief that 71% of this department was so dispensable amidst a global crisis of human trafficking. I'm not surprised that the MAGA base is now questioning this administration's commitment to human trafficking globally and domestically. But I want to move on to talk about waste and corruption. While claiming to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, DOJ itself has estimated that shuttering USAID will cost taxpayers more than $6 billion and millions of dollars worth of humanitarian aid, which the U.S. has already paid for, and it's wasting away in warehouses across the world. This administration has destroyed the world's premier international development agency because the Doge Bros didn't understand how to read a spreadsheet. This administration has also paused enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act while foreign interests spend millions at the president's resorts. I simply fail to see how these actions make Americans safer, stronger, or more prosperous. And I want to focus in on this topic of waste, fraud, and abuse. Mr. Deputy Secretary, are you aware of the America First Opportunity Fund that's been talked about?
Yes.
Okay. What is this account actually going to fund?
So this will be the premier foreign assistance fund for the department, which will be at the direction of the Secretary, and it will provide for foreign assistance that will make America safer and stronger and more prosperous, and will provide for democratic accountability in how those funds are being spent, so we don't have the situation where we had all of these examples of foreign assistance spending that kind of shocked the conscience of ordinary Americans about how their taxpayer dollars were being spent overseas for purposes that didn't advance our national interests, or were being spent on things that even the host country did not want.
Can you tell us what controls, if any, will be put in place to ensure that this fund cannot be used for personal or political benefits of anyone in this administration?
Sure, I think there are numerous controls in place. You have public accountability, number one. You have congressional oversight. You've got inspectors general who can review all of these spending.
Congressional oversight, well, I don't think we're seeing much actual congressional oversight by the majority right now in this Congress of this administration. So I am skeptical that this slush fund will have any kind of appropriate oversight. And I am deeply worried about the effect of us sending $2.9 billion to the administration for a slush fund that has pretty limited oversight and limited controls or guardrails.
I would also add you have public oversight as well. I mean, as you know, the president is before the cameras almost every single day at cabinet meetings, at the White House, getting on the plane, getting off the plane. He's taking questions. Any enterprising reporter can ask him about how this money is being spent.
You're right. He does talk a lot on TV right now. I did see him recently try to defend not releasing the Epstein files. But with that, I will yield back.
Representative yields back. With that, the representative from Indiana, Mr. Barrett, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you being here, Mr. Secretary. And I guess my question focuses on the fact that your duties as the Deputy Secretary of Management and Resources, you oversee modernization and operational efficiency. In that vein, you know, I want to make sure that and we talk about soft diplomacy, and I'm interested in agriculture. So the commodities that end up going to some of these countries, I want to be sure that they actually reach those people that it was intended for. American farmers and ranchers, and we as a country as well, are a giving people, but we also want to make sure that it gets to those that we intend it for it go to. So in that vein, I guess since your confirmation back in May, could you highlight? I want to give you the opportunity to highlight some of the inefficient areas that you found and what processes you are using or decisions you're using to improve those efficiencies and make sure that we're being effective for the kinds of programs that we're operating here.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Congressman. So we've conducted an extensive review of the organization at the department, led by the undersecretaries at the department who, at this point, were all career Foreign Service officers or career civil servants who've been at the department for years and have tremendous experience and knowledge about how things work and how they don't work, and have experienced the department on a bipartisan basis through Republican administrations and Democrat administrations, and told us what they thought worked, where there were duplications, where there were offices that were not really performing well, how we could do a better job advancing America's foreign policy interests and the president's foreign policy priorities. We looked at all of the management functions in the department and consolidated those mostly into the Management Bureau, but many of the bureaus and offices had their own management functions that did human resources functions and accounting functions, and those were all consolidated into a single executive management offices within the bureaus to allow for economies of scale and to allow for efficiencies. So we've done a lot of work to create these efficiencies across the department, and looking at how we do foreign assistance. There was a huge foreign assistance review that was done at the department before I arrived that looked at how we were spending money, and that's been the result. What's resulted from that is the FY26 budget request, where we have the America First Opportunity Fund to create better accountability for how those monies are spent and to ensure that they are spent to advance the Secretary's priorities and to ensure the President's foreign policy is faithfully implemented.
So continuing in that vein, you know, I had a chance to go to Africa a couple of times, and one of the concerns that I saw there was the nefarious groups or gangs or thugs in some ways, because those commodities end up being fungible, just like money. If you've got it, you've got control. Can you give me some insight into, or us, some insight into how you think we're improving monitoring where those commodities are going?
So I think for life-saving humanitarian aid and foreign assistance, you know, those programs were exempted from the humanitarian or from the foreign assistance review. But this is the kind of thing that, as we take a closer look at how we do foreign assistance, is making sure that we have partners on the ground who are able to ensure that our foreign assistance is able to be delivered securely and that it is safeguarded from these kinds of malevolent actions, and that other aid that is delivered is tied directly to a foreign policy priority that the president has. But if you've got sort of particular scenarios or examples in individual countries that you want us to look at, happy to look at that and make sure that to the extent those kinds of activities were happening or our aid was subject to inappropriate use, that we could take corrective action on that.
And I thank you for mentioning, again, you mentioned it earlier, but the fact that those humanitarian efforts are exempted from this, from what we're talking about. So with that, I got about 17 seconds less, and that's enough to just say thank you for what you do.
Thank you, sir.
The gentleman yields back. With that, Representative Titus from Nevada is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'd like to pick back up with something Ms. Kim was saying earlier about the closing of consulates. Earlier this year, your department sent a preliminary notification to Congress that it was going to move to close dozens of consulates and embassies. And they're around the world. They range from Luxembourg to the Maldives, from Durban, South Africa, to Busan, South Korea. I mean, they're everywhere. And one that I was especially concerned about was in Europe, and that's Thessaloniki, plans to close the consulate there in Thessaloniki, Greece. And I think this is at a time of real rising geopolitical instability, especially in that part of the world where Greece plays such a key role. The consulate there, especially, it's ensuring the potential of the base at Alexandropoli and the port at Thessaloniki. It plays a role in the implementation of IMEC. It's helping people come to the Olympics. I just wonder, without the consulate, aren't the beneficiaries of our not being there going to be China and Russia? And given your experience and connections there, do you really think that's a good idea?
So I don't think there's been any move to close the consulate in Thessaloniki. I do know a review was done of all of our overseas posts to assess their costs to the American taxpayer, to assess their benefits to the American taxpayer, to assess any revenue. As you know, consulates can generate revenue through fees and visa applications. But my understanding is I don't think any decisions have been made regarding closure, but people may be drawing conclusions from that analysis if they're looking at a consulate that maybe is very high cost or is in a remote area or is not providing substantial benefit. But I'd be happy to look at any particular concerns you have about individual consulates.
Well, I appreciate that, because when the secretary came to the committee, I asked him about how we're going to process visas for people to come for the upcoming Olympics and the World Cup if you're cutting these different consulates, because that's where a lot of people go. And he said, and I'll quote him, "There is no proposal at this time to close embassies or consulates. There has been media reporting because people like to leak lies, but there's been no such proposal, and I think I would know." Well, we're not hearing any more specifics, whether it's what's happening with the study, is it going forward? Are you going to consult with Congress, because that's the law, before you close any of these overseas posts?
Oh, certainly. I mean, we've consulted on the reorganization that we've just begun to undertake, and I think my understanding is we provide briefings. I think 8 briefings per day to the Congress on various activities that are happening at the department. So I don't think this would be any different.
All right, well, if you can help me get that information, I'd appreciate it, because I think China is expanding its diplomatic footprint while we're decreasing ours, and that seems to be not in our strategic interest. Another thing I'd like to ask you about is what Ranking Member Meeks was talking about with the present assignment of Foreign Service employees not being a factor for RIFs. I think that was kind of the conclusion that he drew based on a circulated department memo back from May. But we know that's not true, because just last month, without talking to Congress, y'all changed the Foreign Affairs Manual, and that's the document that sets out the procedure for RIFs, and now it makes it easier to fire Foreign Service officers. And when committee staff repeatedly reached out to try to get details on the RIFs, they were told that the department wouldn't provide such details in order to protect, and I'm quoting, the dignity of the workforce. So I wonder if you'll just explain to us, what about the dignity of the workforce was protected when you just sent 1,300 employees home and said, thanks, but no thanks?
Well, certainly, thank you. I mean, look, no one wants to be on the receiving end of a reduction in force notice. This happens all the time in the private sector. It happens, I think President, Clinton, he reduced the federal workforce by, I think, 377,000 employees. The federal workforce was reduced by 220,000 under President Obama. But we wanted to make sure that any employee was not finding out through media reports that they were going to be losing their job. We had a sacred responsibility to tell them individually, directly from the department, about their particular job situation, and that we didn't want them to get that notification from anyone else.
But some of the reasons for why they were riffed were just like coincidence of being in the country, not anything that they had done or the job wasn't needed. I mean, that seems to be pretty undignified, but thank you, and I guess my time is up.
The gentlelady's time has expired, and I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Rigas, there's been a lot of speculation and motivation projected onto you personally, the State Department, certainly the administration. Explain to us, what is the purpose of this fiscal and personnel realignment? In your words.
Well, thank you for that question, Congressman. It's to align the mission of the department with the core function, with what its original core function is, which is conducting the foreign policy and diplomacy of the United States government.
And are you saying that maybe we had gotten out of focus on some of that?
I think so. I think some of that started in the post-Cold War environment where we didn't have that Soviet threat anymore, and so a lack of focus led to sort of an expansion of offices and issue-specific areas that it was sort of a department looking for a mission, looking for a function. I think it's pretty clear we're back in an era of great power competition, and I think that's focused the mind and focused our intentions back to engaging in real diplomacy.
Yeah, many of us up here questioned the role of USAID in pushing not aid, but philosophy and actions onto a lot of countries. And I'm assuming that this kind of reform is intended to enhance transparency, enhance efficiency. Anything else it's trying to do?
Yeah, and centering the mission, empowering our diplomats. Most of the work that's been consolidated, the offices that have been eliminated, have been to take those functions. The functions themselves haven't been eliminated, or at least the functions that we want to keep have not been eliminated. They've been moved.
As you were pointing out with the office with trafficking, correct?
Yes. They've been moved to the regional bureaus, right? And to the posts overseas. So our ambassadors who are in those countries where, say, human trafficking is occurring, or the regional bureaus where it's a big problem, they are now the ones who are empowered, who know these countries best, and who are in the best possible position to take action.
Is that why we put ambassadors in place?
That is why we put ambassadors in place.
Okay.
They have the title plenipotentiary because they are the chief ranking official in that country representing the President of the United States.
Well, welcome to Washington, which always believes if 10 is good, 100 must be better, and frankly, 1,000 must be essential.
Yes.
So I think we're seeing this disruption of this notion of just adding to budgets and adding to FTEs. Somehow that means a better product, or certainly that the interests of the United States are being brought about in a better manner around the world. And I mean, that's clearly not been the case, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, and you see even some of the most successful and iconic American companies out there, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, they've laid off people. They do it all the time. And it's not because they don't have the money to pay for it. It's because those offices or those functions aren't doing what they need to be doing, and they need to focus on their core mission.
Not to mention $36 trillion in debt. So I'm going to move on, though. I'm going to take on a personal issue. This has been of particular interest to me, that following the Biden administration's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan is the treatment of our Afghan allies. Again, these are Afghans who have risked their lives and their families' lives to serve alongside the U.S. Armed Forces for years, thus saving countless American lives along the way. I know the chairman has had personal experience on this. I've said this on many occasions that we must uphold that sacred commitment that we've made to them, and I believe these brave Afghanis who have undergone rigorous vetting processes that have been required and properly and so are welcome into my neighborhood and my state anytime. Can you give me a quick update on the status of the U.S. Department of State's Office of Coordinator for Afghan Relocation Efforts, CARE?
So yes, we're continuing to process those requests for folks who want to get SIV visas. I believe we have $500 million from the prior year that we've deemed sufficient to continue operating that effort going forward into FY26. We've admitted, I think, 1,200 folks under that program since the beginning of the administration. And the functions of the CARE office have moved to the regional South Central Asia desk. Again, this is part of how we're empowering the regional bureaus and the ambassadors to take care of the diplomatic work in their countries and in their regions, the people who are best positioned to know those areas best. So that work is continuing.
All right, my time has expired. With that, Representative Jacobs from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Deputy Secretary Rigas, thanks for being here. I want to start with the Global Fragility Act. As you know, a bipartisan landmark law that passed in 2019. This law was designed to implement many of the lessons from years of costly and unsuccessful U.S. stabilization efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan and Somalia. And it was designed to make foreign assistance more strategic and effective, something I know the Secretary has said he cares about. Congress remains very committed to this law. I just recently introduced a GFA reauthorization bill with Chair Emeritus McCall, and the House National Security Appropriations Bill just appropriated money for GFA implementation. Secretary Rubio also recently promised Senator Coons in an appropriations hearing that GFA would still be implemented at the department. However, the RIFs announced last week closed the office, the Conflict and Stabilization Operations Bureau, and fired the staff that have implemented GFA since its passage. So, Deputy Secretary Rigas, how does the department intend to implement the Global Fragility Act if you just fired all of the relevant staff with the institutional knowledge and expertise to do this effectively?
So thank you for that question, Congresswoman. The functions of that office are going to be carried out at the regional bureau level, and this is something the Secretary's talked about, is empowering both our ambassadors and the regional bureaus who are charged with doing the diplomacy rather than sort of specific functional offices. So we're focusing the functional offices and empowering the regional offices to be able to carry out those diplomatic functions.
Sure. There are about 20 people who were previously dedicated to GFA implementation, who were carrying out important coordinating, monitoring, evaluation and learning, and planning functions. Exactly how will that be replaced?
So those functions are going to be done at the regional bureau. So each of the regional bureaus will take responsibility for those functions to ensure, and they're taking responsibility for foreign assistance in their regions, and the ambassadors are going to have responsibility.
I understand. But why didn't you move over anyone with any actual experience with GFA to the regional bureaus if that was your intent, instead of firing them?
So the folks, the folks who are in those offices are also working contemporaneously with people in the regional bureaus. So I don't think it's correct to say people in the regional bureaus or at posts don't understand how to carry out foreign assistance in accordance with the Global Fragility Act. So I'm very confident they're going to be able to do that going forward.
Deputy Secretary Rigas, you and I both know that foreign service officers and civil servants in the regional bureaus are already stretched thin. And the idea that we are now putting on top of that significant programmatic and coordinating and monitoring and evaluation on top of their existing workload without any of the expertise or institutional knowledge from that process over the last 5 years. And remember, this bill passed when President Trump was president the first time. This is not some lefty priority. This is a bipartisan priority of Congress. Can you provide to our committee a clear plan for how the department will implement GFA, including by ensuring adequate staffing with the appropriate conflict expertise and implementation experience?
Sure. So we have hired, or we're in the process of hiring back about 400 folks who had worked at USAID, at the regional bureaus, and at posts overseas, in addition to hiring about another 400 folks who are going to be locally employed staff who help to administer these programs. So to the extent that we, and this is something we're going to be under constant evaluation and review to ensure that our ambassadors and regional bureaus have the staff and expertise they need to be able to execute and implement on that.
So are you going to hire back any people from CSO or people who worked specifically on the GFA?
So to the extent that there are jobs so there are very prescriptive rules around how RIFs, reductions in force, have to be done in the federal government and how people can be hired back. So we'd have to make sure we are abiding by how those rules are promulgated. But if there is a need that our ambassadors or regional bureaus are demonstrating that they want or need a particular expertise, we'd be happy to consider that.
Okay, well, I will look forward to that written response from you on what the actual plan is. I will also say in the CN that we received, the reorganization CN, it said the Office of Foreign Assistance Policy was going to take on certain statutory policy. What you're telling me is that it will actually be the regional bureaus who are doing the GFA implementation. So if we could also get clarification on who actually will be responsible for the statutory, bipartisan, congressionally mandated GFA implementation. Please include that in your written response on the plan to implement it. Thank you. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Representative Lawler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Deputy Secretary, Secretary Rubio, OMB Director Vaught, and administration officials have repeatedly asserted to Congress that funding is not being cut or frozen for the procurement and delivery of American-made, ready-to-use therapeutic foods. However, as of today, as I understand it, no RUTF orders have been processed this year, and the two nonprofit manufacturers who make these products, which are sourced from 27 states across the U.S., are in danger of going out of business. Can you provide me with an update on the status of moving these orders forward?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. I regret I'm not familiar with this particular issue, but I'd be happy to take it on board, look into it, and get you a response.
Okay. If you can do so expeditiously, that would be helpful.
I will do so, sir. Thank you.
What is the status of the State Department's Office of the Coordinator for Afghan Relocation Efforts?
So that office, we're still processing SIV visas that for under Chief of Mission Authority. That work, like the work of a lot of that's being done at the State Department now under our reorganization, is being moved to the regional bureaus. So it's being moved from that, the care functions are being moved to the regional South Central Asia desk. My understanding is we've admitted about 1,200 people under this program since the beginning of the administration, and that work, the processing of those visas continues.
So you expect that program under the auspices of the regional desk will continue moving forward?
Yes, it is continuing under the South Central Asia desks, yeah.
Okay. Do you see has there been any discussion of changes to the actual approval of visas for Afghanistan interpreters and others that helped us during the Afghanistan war moving forward? Or do you see the program largely continuing as is?
My understanding is that about 400,000 people have been admitted with SIVs from Afghanistan, and that the so-called easy cases have kind of made their way through, and there are sort of a number of hard cases at the end of people who did not or could not pass vetting to be admitted into the United States, and so. I think it's down to harder cases now, so I don't know that we're going to see the kinds of numbers we've seen previously admitted, but the review work continues.
One of the things that was obviously a big concern with USAID was some of the funding that went to different projects or entities that, on the face, we would not support. For instance, an anti-Semitic rapper who got $3 million to promote anti-Israeli rap songs in Gaza and the West Bank, as well as obviously funding that previously went to UNRWA on the work that they did to undermine and foment hate and anti-Semitism and teach Palestinian students to hate Jews and frankly want to kill Jews, which is part of why we saw October 7th happen. What is it that the State Department is doing now to make sure that that type of funding does not occur ever again? And two, obviously with the change in how we're getting humanitarian assistance into Gaza, how do you see that functioning?
So number one, I think the elimination of USAID as a foreign aid institution, I think was step one to that. Number two was the creation of the America First Opportunity Fund, which is what the administration has proposed in its FY26 budget to ensure democratic accountability in how foreign assistance funds are being distributed. You look at this long list of USAID funds that I think kind of shocked the public conscience about how public taxpayer dollars were being spent. And you can't really answer the question who authorized that or who approved it, or there was no one that you could really hold it. I mean, you could technically hold the USAID administrator accountable for that, but they're going to say, I never saw that or never approved it. With the America First Opportunity Fund, this is done at the discretion of the secretary under the president's authority as the chief foreign policy officer of the United States, and he's someone who's before the press every single day. He can be asked questions by the public. I mentioned earlier there's congressional oversight as well. The inspector general can also review how monies are being spent. So I think there's going to be the questions about accountability. I think there are multiple layers of accountability for how that money is spent. And the ultimate accountability is to the American voter, right? They can say, I don't like how this money was spent, or I do.
Thanks. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Representative Jayapal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Deputy Secretary Rigas, for being here. Before coming for Congress, I worked for a Seattle-based nonprofit that was one of the largest implementing global health issues around the world. And in our state, Washington State, global health is a leading industry. It creates tens of thousands of jobs right there at home. It generates billions of dollars for our economy. And the destruction of USAID and the massive cuts that we've seen to research and science and global health, I believe, are really weakening our soft power abilities through global development. And I think they're leaving Americans vulnerable to the spread of disease that does not know any boundaries. Thousands of people in my district have worked for state or for programs that receive that funding, and they've devoted their lives to putting America first, but you fired them. You fired them. Not based on merit, not based on skills, not based on work history, not by looking at if there was anywhere else in the State Department that these career civil servants could be. You just fired them because you had a 15% staff firing target. One of them speaks multiple languages, had an onward assignment to promote U.S. businesses and strengthen our critical mineral supply chain. Another one was sent back after spending her entire life devoted to humanitarian assistance work in Afghanistan, Sudan, the Middle East, some of the toughest regions in the world where we desperately will need translators, people with bilingual experience. Another one served in war zones in the Middle East and was fired 1 week away from qualifying for her pension after nearly 20 years of service. It is stunning to me to see how these career civil servants have been treated by your administration. And on top of that, the administration's budget request slashes global health spending by almost 2/3, and a recent study estimates that in 10 years, these cuts could cause 14 million preventable deaths. 14 million. I've worked all over the world, lived all over the world, and seen the power that the United States builds by the work that we do in other countries. I want to remind any public that may be watching that we spend less than a fraction of a percent of our budget on foreign assistance. In fact, sometimes I go out and people say, you spend too much money. And I say, great, you tell me what you think we spend. Usually they say around 20%. I say, you tell me what you think we should spend, and I will do that. I will do that number. And you're laughing because you know that what people say back to me is spend 10%. If you just spend 10%, I would do that. I'm like, great, I'll take it. Because the work we do through these programs is so important, and the skills and the talent of our public servants is so incredible. The average taxpayer, Mr. Rigas, spends 18 cents per day to fund USAID. That's funding that saved over 90 million lives and prevented outbreaks that would have threatened American lives. And so I guess I just want to know, do you understand how your cuts are going to make Americans less safe?
So, as I noted earlier, the Secretary has exempted life-saving humanitarian assistance from the foreign aid review. So that kind of aid will continue. But as I also mentioned, we need to have a graduation strategy for countries for whom we're providing this kind of assistance, whether it's 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. Like when are they going to have the capacity to be able to administer these programs themselves? We've seen that with our FY26 budget request for PEPFAR, which is 85.
Let me stop you there just for a second to say that life-saving aid alone, first of all, it's not flowing the way that we thought it was going to flow when the Secretary said that. Secondly, you know it's not enough. If you listen to the experts, life-saving is very different than disease prevention. I've worked on disease prevention for a long time. When a disease breaks out, what you need to know is that there is a response immediately. And the work of USAID took disease prevention response times on outbreaks from 2 weeks to 2 days. That 2 weeks is a critical moment for us to be able to stop those diseases from spreading. And we're in a situation now where we can't even analyze samples that come to us from other countries because they're being put through all kinds of other cuts at the CDC, at other agencies. And so it's simply just not the case that life-saving is enough. I have 19 seconds, so I want to turn to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. How many sites does GHF operate? Do you know?
I do not know.
That's under your jurisdiction, your resources. It's 4. How many square miles is Gaza? Do you know?
I do not.
Guess what? It's over 140 square miles, 6 times the size of Manhattan. Do you know how often those sites are open?
I do not.
They are barely open, Mr. Rigas. This is not the way to get aid to people in Gaza. And if you're going to be here over personnel and operations, I would ask that you know the details of what you are actually overseeing and ask the experts to come in and help you. Because whatever people say about UNRWA, we were delivering aid
Gentlelady's time has expired.
to the people that needed
Representative
it.
Vice
Thank
is
you.
now recognized.
Deputy Secretary, you've been beat up over the 6 months or so that the new administration's been in trying to change what is effectively a lifetime of problems in how we implement the taxpayer dollars around the world. So I'm going to switch a little bit. It's not going to be gentler or kinder, but it will be different. I want to talk about the things that have been wrong for a long time that I see currently, what's gone on so far, not implementing these changes. And I'll give you the heads up. It's basically OBO operations, visa processing, and your IT, both CIO and CTO. So I'll take them in reverse order. With the consolidation of so many disparate organizations, many of which had multiple CIOs/CTOs, multiple different server systems, and quite frankly, didn't even talk within their organization. Do you have, or can you work with this committee to present us with a plan to get to a single, consolidated, and of course, modern and secure, presumably cloud system, so that we can have confidence that it's both secure and affordable?
Yes, I would be happy to do so, Congressman.
Good. It'll be a tough job.
Yeah.
Secondly, I'd like to talk about OBO. Long before Benghazi, the organization was a mess. Long before Benghazi, it was decades behind in meeting the modernization just for basic safety and security of embassies, much less desperate remote locations, offices, and so on. During the George W. Bush administration, there was tremendous progress made by changing from one-of designs to standard design, standard build. Obviously, each site looks somewhat different, but standard parts, and for the most part, cookie-cutter programs that allowed us to speed up dramatically. President Obama enjoyed during his 8 years the 4 years of work, or the 8 years of work done by General Williams. Are you prepared to return to a system that is cost-effective, speeds up the process, and improves the security for all the men and women who work abroad?
Absolutely, and I think the cost of building overseas and the requirements that we put on our contractors, I believe we only have really 2 contractors that currently provide services to us overseas, which I think is just not adequate, is not enough competition, and there's not enough companies that are able to meet the requirements.
I'm shocked you say a duopoly is not a good way to do business.
Shocked, yeah.
Well, thank you, and we look forward to working with that. Lastly, the chairman has announced and is in the process, as you know, of a full reauthorization of your agency. That is an amazing task and one that hasn't been done in decades. In that task, I want to call back to the era of the visa decision that was made during Chairman Henry Hyde's day. At that time, as the Department of Homeland Security was being stood up, the goal of the George W. Bush administration under Colin Powell, they planned on removing all visa services, the consular services that actually do the interviews and evaluation and give the visas to foreigners. They were going to move it to Homeland Security, and Homeland Security would then field people as necessary. Henry Hyde, listening to the State Department, pushed hard and was able to stop that on the theory that it was A, a career path, and B, that it would streamline the process to keep it within state. Mr. Deputy Secretary, that hasn't proven to be true, has it?
No, I don't think. I don't know, but I take your word for it.
And in that sense, if you talk to anyone in your consular section, they're going to tell you that they are the beginning of the process, but at the end of the day, Homeland Security and other agencies not facing the public make all the decisions, and they can only say, we don't have approval, we don't have delay, and those delays go on for months without answer. I'm sure you've heard that.
Yes.
In the reauthorization, would you work with the committee on the possibility that we do, in fact, implement some version of that original plan, one in which the forward-facing, the responsibility to Homeland Security to make those decisions in a single step, not in a series of steps that are so opaque? Would you agree to work with us at least on the concept and the possibility that that would be good for both the foreigners who wait in line and, quite frankly, for a massive amount of people who begin in that position, and that position is, at least my observation, is truly not part of the career path of foreign officers?
Yeah, I'd be happy to work with you, sir.
Thank you. At that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes Representative Stanton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is an important hearing. Mr. Deputy Secretary, as you well know, we are in the middle of an intense competition with China, and we will need the strongest military on the planet, but we will need more than the strongest military on the planet, because the true battle is for economic superiority and, of course, this battle of communism versus our form of government, democracy. China has spent vast amount on international development projects over the last decade, almost $700 billion compared to USA's $80 billion. So I appreciate and support the request for a budget increase for the Development Finance Corporation to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative. Let's be clear. China will outspend us. This means we need to be smarter about our spending. The Government Accountability Office suggested that our dollars go further if we have larger in-country presence. But President Trump just arbitrarily cut 1,300 department employees. That includes employees who are directly working on the U.S. response to China, who are experts in global tech competition and who spoke fluent Mandarin. We know that multilateral efforts like export controls are more effective at protecting American supply chains when we work together with our allies than doing so alone. But President Trump has burned many relationships by imposing tariffs on our strongest allies and given China the ability to position itself as the defender of free trade. And then, of course, there are reckless cuts. This budget request moves USAID under the State Department, and only 14% of the projects remain, and only 6% of USAID staff. China will see this vacuum and has already stepped in to fill it. This budget request zeroes out funding for the UN. Meanwhile, China has been increasing its funding and putting its people in key leadership roles, shifting global power dynamics away from United States leadership. This budget request cuts funding for the international narcotics and law enforcement, funding that is directly used to curtail Chinese illegal transshipment and counter Chinese aggression in the South China Sea. China will undoubtedly take advantage of weaker law enforcement to expand its presence. Mr. Deputy Secretary, are you aware of how large China's overseas diplomatic footprint is around the globe? And then does it worry you that it is overtaking the United States diplomatic footprint?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. My understanding is while we are somewhat equally matched in terms of how many posts we have overseas, the United States does have substantially more personnel serving overseas, both at the State Department and at the interagency at our posts overseas.
I really appreciate that, and I want to keep it that way and even continue to enhance it. I'm a big believer that our diplomatic efforts are going to help us continue to lead the world. Deputy Secretary, according to the Lowy Institute, China has the most expansive diplomatic network in the world, with more outposts in Africa, East Asia, and Central Asia, and the Pacific Islands. Can you give us specific examples of how you plan to keep engaging in those regions after the reductions in force?
Sure. So first of all, the reductions in force only affected our domestic operations. They did not affect our foreign service officers overseas. I think the president has really shown the way with his first trip abroad. We went to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE about economic engagement, both U.S. investing there and bringing back an enormous amount of investments to the U.S. economy. And I think that's the kind of diplomatic and economic engagement we want to see that ties together the interests of the United States with countries overseas so that we are economic partners. We're helping them grow and they're helping us as well.
I think the restructuring of the department and the reduction in force is going to be of enormous importance to both Democrats and Republicans here. So will you commit to keeping this committee informed about plans to restructure or reduce personnel who are posted abroad and do so before you start implementing those changes?
Yes.
I really appreciate that. Here's what's at stake. China is taking advantage of this moment to strengthen their standing on the world stage. Meanwhile, the administration is gutting the State Department budget to its lowest level since before World War II. In my opinion, that does not make the United States stronger. When America retreats, China advances. When we fire our experts, they hire more. When we walk away from the table, they sit down and set the terms. And I believe if we keep handing Beijing the keys to global leadership, the next generations will ask why we let America's influence crumble, not because we couldn't afford it, but because we didn't fight for it. With that, I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Representative Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Deputy Secretary, welcome here. I'm going to start with a 2024 GAO report that flagged $3.2 million in duplicative contracts for overseas cultural programs. And I'm just wondering if you can identify for us any specific duplicative contracts that have been terminated and kind of what metrics you use. I think the work you do is probably very difficult to measure success, but contracts are contracts, money's being spent. The American people demand something for it as they should. How do you do that? Can you name any duplicative contracts that have been terminated?
Well, I don't have the specific contract lines in front of me, but there was what the Secretary has articulated in terms of how we want to spend our money, both in grants and in contracts, is that we can tie that directly to the 3 goals he has articulated, and that hopefully every contract and grant that we are delivering on or executing on is making America safer, making America stronger, and making America more prosperous. And if it's not doing all 3, it should certainly be doing at least one. If it's not doing one, then we're not doing that contract and we're not doing that grant.
So I kind of agree with that. Now, the State Department's budget has operated without reauthorization for 23 years, which is astounding. Most Americans don't understand that, and there's not a good explanation for it. 80% of the operations are literally unauthorized. recent report exposed $1.8 million in grants for overseas gender equity programs, including $500,000 for workshops in sub-Saharan Africa. Deputy Secretary, are you familiar with places like Chad, Somalia, Ethiopia? Do you think, like my colleague from Arizona was just talking about China winning the diplomatic race because we're not there and we can afford to do more. Seems to me, if you can't find enough food to eat, the last thing, or in, the list of the last things you're interested in are gender equity programs, right? We can ill afford it. We're never going to be able to outpace China if it's just spending money. We have to be smart about it, and we can't waste our money on things like that. Department's got a history of funding programs that stray, and the word stray I kind of use loosely, from American interests, like $700,000 for climate-focused art exhibits in Asia per 2023 OIG audit. You have a list of specific grants like those for gender equity or climate art exhibits that have been axed or realigned with the FY26 budget with America's strategic priorities? Do you have anything like that?
I can certainly provide you a list. I mean, I have a series of examples here in front of me that I think have gone, the Secretary's gone over in prior hearings, as well as have been, talked about from the White House podium about, examples of grant spending from USAID that I think most Americans would agree was not a good use of taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, I think the list is replete, but every time you hear them, look, there are folks here that don't like the fact that we're trying to reduce the size of government and that you've been put in charge of it. But, a 2023 OPM report revealed a 15% staffing increase since 2010, yet a 2024 CSIS study found no corresponding uptick in diplomatic outcomes, such as trade agreements or counterterrorism success, which leads American taxpayers who give up their hard-earned money for this to say, what the heck are we paying for?
Yes.
Program after program. So I'm not going to ask you to go through them, but I think it's important that we remind everybody that there is a limited amount of funds, that we do have to compete globally with an adversary like China, and that we have to spend our money wisely, not on stupid things and not wastefully. I mean, I'll turn to the 2021 SIGAR report that revealed $1.2 billion in unaccounted for funds during the Afghanistan withdrawal, which is a glaring failure. And, if we talk about grants for cultural festivals in South Asia, let me ask you that. So grants for a cultural festival in South Asia, where does that fit into aligning America's priorities with defeating our adversaries in South Asia? Is there something there that we're missing?
It does not. No, I think that's probably a misguided attempt by folks to think that was an exercise of soft power, but I don't think anyone could draw a line from how funding that enhances America's power or influence in that part of the world.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Representative Costa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I apologize if some of the questions have been asked to you previously because we've had overlapping committee hearings. Part of the meat and potatoes, I think, of a legislative office is helping our constituent services with issues of passports, visa accounts, and in middle of California, in Fresno, and those counties, we have a large Latino community that has family members in not only Mexico, but Central American countries, a large Punjabi population, large in India, and we deal with this daily. How many individuals within the Consular Affairs Bureau were terminated?
My understanding is we did not make any cuts in the Consular Affairs Bureau.
They were not targeted for positions?
Yeah,
because
no
I
one
raised
was
that issue with the
processing, yeah.
Secretary as it related to some consular offices that had played a role within the department. I'll send you a letter forwarding that. So then, what's your process? You have enough staffing to maintain current processing for passports on timelines?
Yeah, there were no reductions to individuals who process passports or visas in consular affairs. So to the extent that we're able to implement, technology solutions or other labor
The
saving.
technology solutions, as you've made a transfer to computerization, has had some challenges. Has that not been the case?
Well, I mean, there's a modernization program underway
Right.
for passports.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it like any new program, it hasn't been implemented without challenges. Would you say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
The issue on terminations, how many of the State Department employees, including Foreign Service officers, served in rotational assignments? Do you know?
So my understanding is with respect to the Foreign Service is about 14,000 Foreign Service.
And yes or no, were those part of those that were served termination notices?
There were, I think, 239 Foreign Service
Was an
officers.
assessment conducted on their performances? Because I've had anecdotal stories where they'd gotten glowing reports on their past performance and then they were summarily dismissed.
So the reduction in force rules that exist in the government are very prescriptive, and so if you're eliminating...
What were the metrics?
So if an office itself was eliminated and someone was in that office, if an entire, we had offices that were eliminated and other offices that were combined or merged with other offices, but if you were in an office that was completely eliminated, everyone in that office, foreign and civil service...
Well, we've got reports, and we'll help hopefully get clarity on that. Those in consular services that their jobs were eliminated. And I'd like to have you respond to that, and I'll get you the information. How's that sound? Were they simply fired by serving in the wrong post, or what other considerations were using to reassigning employees who have some of the toughest posts in some of the areas that are not the plum political assignments that administrations also have the opportunity to provide?
Sure, thank you. So the reorganization affected domestic offices only. So if someone was serving in a domestic office and that office was completely closed, then the employees who were in that office in that competitive area would have received a reduction in force notice.
Okay, well, we'll follow up with these other questions. Let me close on food for peace. State of Kansas sold half its annual wheat crop abroad, representing significant income to Kansas farmers. I'm from California, but 44% of our agriculture in California is exported. The administration, I think, proposes to eliminate food for peace in fiscal year 26 budget. It's terminated many of the contracts, meaning those same farmers have to find alternative markets for crops, and many of them have lost incomes in the process, and that doesn't even count the impacts in the hundreds of millions of dollars of USAID. How does cutting American farmers' market access and international sales make America more prosperous?
Well, I'd have to look into that particular program you referenced, sir.
I would like you to, please.
Yeah, of course.
And if you do, you might want to meet with some farmers or with recipients of the program to discuss the impacts of eliminating the program, not only Food for Peace, but what's been devastating in USAID, I believe.
Yeah. I'd be happy to look into that, sir. I know the president is a big fan of our farmers and wants to see them succeed.
He tells it all the time, but this mass deportation is a real problem, let me tell you. And the Secretary of Agriculture talked about people on their work requirements are going to take those jobs. Give me a break. And automation, it's not there. To be discussed, continued. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Deputy Secretary, thank you for being here today. I know it's been a long day. And just to refresh, what's the mission statement for the Department of State?
Well, I can provide you with a copy of that, sir. But
I'll read it to you.
Okay,
it's to
go ahead.
protect and promote U.S. security, prosperity, and democratic values, and shape an international environment in which all Americans can thrive. Do you support that?
Sounds good to
Do
me,
you think
sir,
that
yes.
works, whether it's
I
a
think so.
Democratic president or a Republican president across decades, across the century marks? That's the role of the State Department, right?
Yes.
All right, now, thinking of your role in this administration, how will you measure success against that mission 4 years from now?
So I think the Secretary's articulated that every action we take and every dollar we spend and every program we execute on should make America safer, should make
But
America
how will you measure
stronger.
that? Give me, I mean, you're organizing, you're going through all these cuts and slashes and changes. How are you going to measure your success 4 years from now when your term is over?
Well, so I think, number one, you can look at how we've engaged with our NATO allies. Number one, that's making America stronger. They've all agreed to increase their spending from 2% of GDP to 5%, something where numerous prior administrations...
And I'm just, we're short on time, so I'm going to reclaim my time. But you said you've worked for 3 administrations, and you mentioned that we've entered a new era of great power competition. Who are our competitors in that?
Well, certainly I think China is at the top of that list.
Anyone else?
Well, we have both friendly competitors and unfriendly competitors.
Okay, but the great power competition, it's China, it's Russia. How important are having and working with allies in determining who's going to win that great power competition?
Well, I think it's important that we have allies rather than clients, right? So we have I think, and we've seen that with our NATO allies. They've gone from being kind of dependents. You know, people used to joke that NATO was a military alliance of countries without militaries, and now we've got them to agree to spend 5% of their GDP.
What distinguishes, I would argue, the United States from China and certainly Russia is our allies, that relationship with NATO, the other alliances we've built. And those alliances, certainly there's a military aspect to it, but the diplomatic aspect. We had Defense Secretary Mattis testified before Congress. He said, you know, if we're not investing in aid and in diplomacy, development and diplomacy, we're going to have to invest more in guns and bullets. It's really important. And the U.S., because of our relationship with our allies, the work of all the people who serve us in the State Department, they may not wear the same uniforms as the military, but they go to places far, they go to places of danger, and they represent and promote and protect U.S. interests, and that's critically important. Let me ask you, are the challenges confronting the U.S. around the world shrinking or growing?
I would say certainly our awareness of them is growing, and I think they're probably growing more than they're shrinking.
Okay. Is the role the United States needs to take on the global stage in working with allies and expressing leadership as we did in World War II, as we did after World War II, as we did in winning the Cold War, is the importance of U.S. leadership shrinking or growing?
I think it's growing. I think that the president has demonstrated that. I mean, I think he's been the biggest actor when it comes to American soft power.
And one last question. If the U.S. isn't leading, what country is in a position best to fill that void in that great power competition to protect U.S. interests and protect Americans around the world?
Sure, I think China is certainly making
of our
a play
allies.
for that.
Who's going to replace the U.S.? We're competing with China. We don't want them to replace us. The U.S. is indispensable. So here's the thing, and I know many of my colleagues have spoken passionately and rightly about the damage this budget and reorganization will do to our diplomatic workforce and America's leadership in the world, and I agree with that. What strikes me, though, and where I'm stuck, it's not just a matter of misplaced priorities or ideology. It's that I don't see a theory of success behind what you are doing, what the department is doing. You said the reorganization is about streamlining and focus. Yet cutting thousands of skilled professionals without first developing a clear plan and having metrics for that plan and how the department will operate differently, it's not streamlining, it's amputating. You propose consolidating foreign assistance, but you haven't shown us how the department is prepared to manage these programs. What concerns me most is that there's no clear picture of how these actions position America to compete with China and respond to future crises. China is expanding their global diplomatic network. We're closing posts and reducing our people, losing expertise that took years, decades to develop, and we're not investing where we need to be. You'll say you manage foreign assistance like an investment program, but we're left wondering who's the portfolio manager. So my last question for you, Mr. Deputy Secretary, you said the goal is a more nimble State Department. Can you point to one example where another country has shrunk what they're doing, pulled back from their role in the world, where they successfully achieved the goals they set out to protect their interests and advance their policies?
Sir, thank you for that question. So the reorganization affected only the domestic footprint of the State Department. It did not affect our overseas posts. And in fact, it is designed to empower our ambassadors. It's almost like we've forgotten that we have ambassadors and regional bureaus who are engaging at posts, who are the tip of the spear when it comes to how we engage with the rest of the world. This was focused on the bloated bureaucracy that was stateside here. We've got 1,400 offices in the United States alone, 1,400 locations, 700 bureaus and offices in the U.S. This is for...
Well, all I know, and I'm over time, thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I've gotten countless calls from constituents and families of constituents who have lost their
We're up on a
job at
time
overseas
limit.
posts. So the
Chair now
statement that you're not
recognizes
cutting overseas
Representative
doesn't
Kamala
match.
Verdov.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Deputy Secretary, for staying. I appreciate that. I serve as the ranking member for the South and Central Asia Subcommittee, so I want to focus on that bureau today. And I do know that two of my Republican colleagues asked questions about an issue that I'm also going to ask you about. So you see that there's bipartisan concern. Would you agree with this statement? And it's a yes or no. The State Department should uphold our commitment to protect the Afghans who helped U.S. service members stationed in Afghanistan.
Of course.
Okay, thank you. Are you aware then, and I think you are, but I'm going to ask it anyway, are you aware of the law that a Republican-led Congress passed last year requiring a coordinator for the Afghan relocation efforts at the State Department or CARE?
I am aware of the CARE office.
Okay, so then you are aware of the law and you're clear on the congressional intent, yet your reorganization plan eliminates the CARE office and the administration has refused to brief us on your plan for Afghan allies or even give us a straight answer about who the coordinator is. And earlier you said that you're briefing the Congress 8 times a day. I don't know who you're briefing because as you can tell, there are both Republicans and Democrats that care about this issue. So can you reveal who the coordinator is?
So the functions for the CARE office have moved to the South Central Asia Bureau at the Department of State.
Right.
And the and to the
But that doesn't answer
regional
the question
ambassadors. Yeah.
about who the person is, who the coordinator is, because there's a difference between a person who's doing the work and a function. I know you folding everything into everything, it's like origami. But how come we don't know? How come you can't tell us? How come you won't tell us who the coordinator is?
Well, that would, the person who's in charge of the South Central Asia Bureau would be the Assistant Secretary for South Central Asia. So that would be the first person, I think.
Okay, well, that I would be interested, I think many of us would be interested in what that person is doing and have them answer some questions that we have, both Republicans and Democrats, about what's going on with our Afghan allies. Because I ask this because on Friday, you fired the entire CARE leadership team. So anyone who would have had the experience and the expertise to efficiently manage Afghan relocations, which is complicated, and Secretary Rubio came in here and we know he's doing 14 jobs. I do not think you should be giving 14 jobs to the 12 people that are left in the State Department who are handling such a complicated issue. So we have had, we know that the CARE leadership team has been fired. We know that the CARE office has lost over 30 people since the beginning of the administration. And we know that that does not give you the capacity that you need to sustain the same pace of processing. And then on top of that, the administration is trying to terminate temporary protective status for Afghans living in the United States. So they're going to lose their work authorization, and then they're going to be deported back to Afghanistan where the Taliban is waiting to get them. And these are people who actually work to protect U.S. service members overseas. I bring it up because everyone wants to, last Congress, we had a hearing every week talking about Afghanistan. And now, very hard to get people to come and talk about Afghanistan and what is happening to our allies. And we are doing a disservice to our U.S. service members because what other country is going to say, I'm going to be willing to stick out my people's neck to help you when you're then going to sell my people down the river or back to the exact same people who are waiting to kill them? The second part of this is, do you know what Camp Asaliya is?
I do not know what Camp
Okay.
Asaliya is.
So the camp is a U.S. facility in Doha where 1,500 Afghan refugees are waiting to be resettled. And the administration is considering closing down the camp and then forcibly repatriating these Afghans who have been in limbo in this facility waiting for years. They're going to repatriate them back to Afghanistan, back into the hands of the Taliban. So the question I asked you in the beginning about the U.S. upholding its commitment to protecting these people who risk their lives to protect us, we have got to do better. And that's on you. That's the responsibility of you. That's the responsibility of the State Department. And I sent a letter to the chair of this committee asking us to continue to ask questions about this. And I'm going to continue to ask questions about this because it's about our credibility. You ain't talking about trade, you ain't talking about aid, you're talking about reneging on your credibility to make sure that our service members are protected when they go overseas to fight for us. And with that, Mr. Chair, I thank you for giving me extra time and I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to take just a moment to tack on to what Representative Kamala-Gordeve was talking about, because I was just in the Homeland Security hearing before this, talking about Afghanistan and this very issue about all these Afghan folks who risk their lives in service of our military while in Afghanistan and all their losing of their temporary protected status benefits. And I would just like to echo her concerns, Mr. Chairman, about how unconscionable it is that we're turning our back on this group of people who risk their lives for our military. And Mr. Secretary, I would love for you to take these concerns that we're having about the fact that you're closing the care office, you're closing the support for this as just a dereliction of the United States duty. It's a breach of promises. It's a breach of agreements. And I share her concerns about what does this do for the U.S. in future conflicts. Have a lot of concerns about that. I wanted to turn just to some general issues about the terminations of so many people. I'm concerned about the fact that were the terminations of all these folks in USAID based on merit? Were they based on length of service? Were they based on reviews? How were you determining who stays and who goes?
Well, thank you for the question, Congresswoman. Everything that happened at USAID happened before my tenure, so I can't speak directly to what occurred there, but it seems to me it was an elimination of function.
And what about ongoing rifts within the State Department? Are those being done based on tenure, reviews, performance, length of service? How are those being evaluated?
Yeah, so the regulations surrounding reductions in force are very prescriptive, and they are personnel, they are person agnostic, they are function specific. So you look at a particular office and what functions you want to retain. If you're merging 2 or 3 offices, which happened over 100 times, we were merging offices. And you say, what functions do we want to retain? And then based on that, if you've got 20 functions you want to retain or 20 positions you want to retain, and you have 100 people in the pool from the 3 offices that are being combined, there's a very prescribed process that is done by OPM, and the State Department actually hired OPM to conduct this process, and they match people based on seniority, based on...
So length of service, performance, those
yes,
things.
so it's a merit-based process at that point.
Yes, so I have a constituent in my district, and her annual evaluation form says she's an expert in high demand across the office with the ability to balance numerous competing demands across portfolio and beyond. She is a rock star, a go-to person for technical knowledge, not afraid, and she has over 15 years of service and was terminated. In my opinion, this is a huge disservice to the State Department and to the role. And isn't this the kind of person I would think that you'd want to retain in our foreign service?
Well, sure. I mean, so the process I described does not allow for us to reach in and grab a particular person that we would like to, save from a RIF. It has to be done according to these prescribed regulations in the government that are merit-based and account for all of these other sort of requirements related to the position. And this is sort of what the law calls for, and this is what has been...
Yeah, but there's provisions in the law, though, for you to make sure that the purge is done not based on optics, not based on ideology, but based on performance and the capacity to do the job. And the reality of it is very experienced people are being depleted out of our foreign service at great peril to the United States of America and to our role in security in the world. I'm very concerned. We spent a lot of time talking about USAID, but I'm also very concerned about talking about the Population Refugee Migration Program. I had the opportunity to be in some foreign countries where they were talking about how detrimental all the cuts are that the U.S. had in these programs. And those programs are designed to retain migrants within these home countries, and yet we're cutting all of the employees, the personnel, and the resources to these countries to keep people from illegally entering the United States. That makes absolutely no sense. And it seems to be in contradiction to the goals here. But I also want to highlight, this employee that I referenced was doing amazing work in PEPFAR, amazing work in HIV and AIDS to minimize the spread throughout the world, and was doing incredible work in honor of programs set by another Republican president, George Bush. And it's really tragic that this administration has targeting in such a demonic way HIV and AIDS and PEPFAR and its role in saving lives. And with that, I am out of time and I yield back.
Chair recognizes Representative Amla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On Friday, as you know, President Trump arbitrarily fired 1,300 expert State Department staffers as part of his capricious effort to slash 15% of the State Department's domestic workforce. Look, our allies around the world are feeling the true impact of these dangerous choices, and our adversaries are grinning from ear to ear. China is already stepping in to fill the void when we cut our foreign assistance, ceding the airwaves to their propaganda, and retreating from the global stage. That is what's happening. And when you claim you want to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse, the foreign aid freeze has led to the resources you oversee literally rotting at ports, medicine expiring, people dying. As you've heard from some of my colleagues earlier today, we learned that nearly 500 metric tons of emergency food assistance, enough to feed over 1 million children for a week, will expire in 24 hours. In a few weeks, this rotten aid will be incinerated, costing taxpayers an additional $130,000. This is a waste of taxpayer dollars. It's a loss of American jobs, and it's hurting American farmers who cannot sell their farm products to aid organizations. This is under your oversight. In my home state of Rhode Island, 120,000 boxes of the emergency food aid known as ready-to-use therapeutic food or Plumpy Nut made by Adhesia Nutrition were stuck in a warehouse for months before the State Department finally paid to transport them to treat the starving children in Sudan. Secretary Rubio announced USAID closing on July 1st, and the remaining programs have been moved into the State Department. But it's been 2 weeks since then and 55 days since the Secretary sat where you are now. And I've seen no real action to get this aid moving. As I told Secretary Rubio, every day around 8,000 children die from global hunger. So why is there no clear plan to continue this foreign assistance? How many children must die? How many jobs, American jobs, are we going to see lost? We needed to get these contracts approved months ago. And while there are delays in creating new contracts, there are also no answers about what's happening to supplies purchased with taxpayer dollars. Earlier this month, I sent this letter to the State Department about reports that unused supplies from canceled foreign assistance programs will go to waste. I asked you all to provide information by today on the process the State Department is using to review the status of supplies for now terminated foreign assistance programs and what your plan was to ensure that these supplies purchased with taxpayer dollars are not diverted, destroyed, or otherwise go to waste. I haven't heard a response, right? We cannot continue to wait for answers while the food that could save these starving children rots in warehouses. That is not American leadership. So Secretary Rigas, what is your plan to ensure that these supplies for now terminated foreign assistance programs do not go to waste? And what is your plan to take action now so we don't waste in the future? Because as you've said, you're a shepherd of taxpayer dollars. That's wasting taxpayer dollars. So tell me what the plan is.
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I'd be happy to look into this particular issue about food that is past its expiration date, that's about to be incinerated. I think it's a policy to not distribute food or medicine that's past its expiration date, so getting an understanding of
Yeah, but it
how
didn't
that
have to get
food-
to the expiration date.
Right, yeah, so getting an understanding of how that came to be, what the shelf life is of this food. Is it 6 months? Is it a year? Is it 5 years? Who's tracking it and how it got to this situation, I think is important and is reasonable.
Respectfully, Secretary, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I've heard this from the Secretary. I've asked, inquired, pleading, because this should be an area of partnership. This is somewhere where we can shine and continue to shine in our leadership, but I can't take, we're looking into it. That's unsatisfactory. So what's the plan?
We're going to make sure it doesn't happen again is what the plan is.
Well, arbitrarily firing 15% of the staff is not a plan, because those people, those experts that you get rid of, I am sure would have some role in making sure that your plan was viable and that you could let American leadership shine. So that's a failure. Do you agree?
I do not agree. I think the 15% that
So it's a success.
the 15% that were let go.
No, I'm talking about the waste of American aid.
Well, you're tying that to a reduction in force that
I
has
am,
nothing to
indeed.
do with that.
Well, I believe that you do not have the personnel to get the job done, and I would like to see a plan. So I am going to request in writing your plan.
Chair
My
now
time is up.
recognizes Representative Castro.
Thank you. Deputy Secretary Rigas, last week the department laid off about 15% of its workforce, and you said earlier and had made a statement about the fact that the decisions were personnel agnostic. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And as you know, members of the Foreign Service regularly rotate through different assignments. A number of such officers had started new positions in the last 6 weeks or have offers to start a position that the administration has not chosen to cut. But they received notices that they would be terminated based on their prior roles, those they held on May 29th, that they were no longer in. Some diplomats had even started new jobs in a foreign country, moved their family over there, enrolled their kids in school, and then received a notice that they would be terminated based on the job that they had on May 29th, not the job that they currently held. If these people are terminated, the United States still needs to fill those roles with diplomats, many of whom would need to undergo months of training or language learning before they can join the position. In other words, the country would have to spend millions and millions of dollars when these people were already in those jobs. Are you aware of this situation, and will you revise the decisions and allow individuals who were terminated based on their job 2 months ago but have joined a new position or have an agreement to join a new position, whether abroad or in the United States, to continue in those roles?
So in order to conduct the reduction in force and the reorganization that we did, it was necessary to have an effective date. That effective date was as of May 29th, which is when the Secretary approved the reorganization plan. Unfortunately, we wanted to move very quickly on that. Unfortunately, a district court judge in California saw fit to intercede and hold up that reorganization, putting people in a tremendous amount of limbo. So people were taking, in this case, it sounds like individuals were moving or taking other actions that were not tied to their current duties. You have
I mean, they were reassigned consistent with what the State Department does every year.
Right.
So they were in new roles. But I mean, you're not disagreeing with me that they are in these new roles and they're getting terminated or fired. The new roles are not being cut out. So you're going to have to go replace those people with new people that you're going to have to spend literally millions and millions of dollars to train, when the purported reason for cutting out these folks is to save money. So I guess I'm trying to work with you.
Yeah.
Will you reconsider what is relatively a small group in the total, reconsider the fact that these people are already trained and we're doing the work that you're going to need to now go fill?
So we have to abide by the reduction in force rules, and they're very prescriptive in terms of once a position is eliminated and an incumbent is eliminated, how they can return to federal service and who's on those retention registers.
Well, I mean, I guess the long and short of it, will these people have a chance to go back to the jobs they were currently holding when they were terminated, not the old ones that they held on May 29th? Yes or no?
Yeah, well, we'd have to do it in accordance with the law and accordance.
But will you give them a chance to go back to work?
I have to do what the law calls for, and
Well, then I'm asking you, what does the law call for? will you give this specific group of people in this conundrum the chance to go into those roles that they were actually working at when they were terminated?
If the law allows for that, certainly.
So we have your commitment that if the law allows for it, that you will allow them back or consider them back for their roles?
Yes, my understanding is I don't think the law allows for it. I'd be happy to check with legal counsel again, but they've been pretty adamant the entire time that.
Okay, so if the law doesn't allow for it, then we just wasted millions of dollars. The decisions that you made wasted millions of dollars.
I would not agree with that.
Well, I mean, we just went through it, right? They were in a new job. They've received the training for this new job. The number of them would total such that it was millions of dollars spent. Now, because these positions that they were holding when they were terminated were not cut out, right? So you're going to have to go and now hire new people for those roles. So it's going to cost you millions and millions of dollars because of a decision that you made.
No, I don't agree with it. So we have about 14,000.
How do you not agree with it?
We have about 14,000 Foreign Service officers. 10,000 of those Foreign Service officers are deployed outside the U.S. We have about 4,000 Foreign Service officers.
Yeah, this applies to people in the U.S. and outside the
who
U.S.
are working CONUS in the United States of America. So we need to get more of those 4,000 Foreign Service officers working in foreign places, which is what their mission is.
No, I guess I don't see how that answers my question. You made a decision that affects a small group of people. It's clearly a bad decision because it's going to cost us millions of dollars when you were trying to save a lot of money. But you're saying that you're not going to do everything you can to rectify that?
Well, what I'm saying is we have Foreign Service officers already on the payroll who are working in the United States of America. I've gotten letters from 2 mayors who say, please give me back my Foreign Service officer. I'm wondering, why is a Foreign Service officer working for a mayor in the United States of America? Like, you don't join the Foreign Service to go work in, Dearborn, Michigan, or in, Orange, California, wherever these folks are working. They need to be working at posts overseas, or they're diplomats in residence.
But then why didn't you cut the jobs? You didn't cut the job.
No, we canceled those details. They were detailed to working for mayors in the United States of America. We recalled their details to come back to state. So
Let me make this one last point. But again, they were working in these roles. These roles were not terminated.
Has expired. All members have had their opportunity to ask their questions. I want to thank you for your time today. I'm going to give you an opportunity to offer any closing statements, comments. You've been asked many questions. Any closing comments that you wish to make, and we'll close out this hearing.
No, well, I just want to thank you, Chairman, and the members of the committee for their questions. It was my honor to be here before today to answer for the members of the committee. I'm happy to do it anytime. I think it's an important function that you perform for the American people, and I appreciate the questions, the hard ones, the easy ones. And I'm happy to give as much transparency as I can about what we're doing and how we're doing it so that your questions and concerns are satisfied.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Rigas. Pursuant to committee rules, all members may have 5 days to submit statements, questions, extraneous materials for the record, subject to length limitations. And with that objection, this committee stands adjourned.